Hello, and welcome to Humanity's Team, the Global Oneness Summit. I'm Emmanuel Kunzelman, and I'm here today to facilitate a program on the Holo Movement as the Crucible of Convergence for the Cosmic Self. I am the co-founder of Greenheart International in Chicago, Illinois, the Foundation for the Future in Spain, and also the co-creating founder of the Global Purpose Movement and Purpose Earth. And I've been on a lifelong search for a moment like this, when the Holo Movement finds its crucible of convergence and welcomes you all into a vessel that will lead us to our cosmic self. So I'd like to welcome our panelists here today discussing the Holo Movement with us. We're very fortunate to have a very distinguished group, 4 people that have helped me over the last year or more to develop the idea of the Holo Movement, working together in the field of consciousness. We have Mason Ewald. Mason is a social entrepreneur. He's a certified compassion facilitator from Stanford University's Center for Compassion and Altruism. He's the executive director for A New Republic of the Heart, which educates and supports change agents in holistic activism. He serves on the outreach team at Poor People's Campaign, and he's a member of the Climate Reality Leadership Corps. Mason, thank you for being here today, and welcome to the Holo Movement.
Thank you, Emmanuel. Completely honored to be with each of you. So looking forward to it.
Well, it's our pleasure to have you. Looking forward to it. Then we also have Jill Robinson. Jill is a freelance copywriter and content creator, and she's passionate about helping mission-driven businesses and nonprofits change the world. Jill is working with Integral Transformative Practice International, the Global Purpose Movement, the Mindful Agency, and Purpose Earth, amongst other mindfully driven businesses and nonprofits. And Jill has been a longtime friend and colleague of mine. We've been working together for over a decade on many of these ideas together. I'm so grateful to Jill for all her love and support throughout the years. Jill Robinson, welcome to today's session. How are you doing?
Oh, thank you, Emmanuel. It is an honor, and I'm very humbled to be joining everyone in conversation today. I'm really excited. Thank you.
Thank you, Jill. Lovely to have you. Year or more to develop the idea of the Holo Movement convergence, and welcomes you all into a vessel that will lead us to our cosmic self. So I'd like to welcome our panelists here today discussing the Holo Movement with us. We're very fortunate to have a very distinguished group, 4 people that have helped me over the last year or more to develop the idea of the Holo Movement, working together in the field of consciousness. We have Mason Ewald. Mason is a social entrepreneur. He's a certified compassion facilitator from Stanford University's Center for Compassion and Altruism. He's the executive director for A New Republic of the Heart, which educates and supports change agents in holistic activism. He serves on the outreach team at Poor People's Campaign, and he's a member of the Climate Reality Leadership Corps. Mason, thank you for being here today, and welcome to the Holo Movement.
Thank you, Emmanuel. completely honored to be with each of you. So looking forward to it.
Well, it's our pleasure to have you. Looking forward to it. Then we also have Jill Robinson. Jill is a freelance copywriter and content creator, and she's passionate about helping mission-driven businesses and nonprofits change the world. Jill is working with Integral Transformative Practice International, the Global Purpose Movement, the Mindful Agency, and Purpose Earth, amongst other mindfully driven businesses and nonprofits. And Jill has been a longtime friend and colleague of mine. We've been working together for over a decade on many of these ideas together. I'm so grateful to Jill for all her love and support throughout the years. Jill Robinson, welcome to today's session. How are you doing?
Oh, thank you, Emmanuel. It is an honor, and I'm very humbled to be joining everyone in conversation today. I'm really excited. Thank you.
Thank you, Jill. Lovely to have you. Then our next panelist is Terry Patton. Terry is a philosopher, activist, teacher, and a leading voice for healing our global crisis through the marriage of higher consciousness and activism. He's an author, the author of A New Republic of the Heart, and he also co-authored with Ken Wilber, Integral Life Practice. He's the co-creator of the podcast State of Emergence, and really a lifelong spiritual practitioner and leader in the Integral movement, and also a very dear friend and collaborator over the years. Terry, it's a great pleasure to have you. Thank you for joining us.
Great to be here.
Great to have you. Thank you. And finally, we have Dr. Jude Kirvan, who is a cosmologist, planetary healer, and futurist. She has a doctorate in archaeology from Reading University in the UK. She's formerly one of the primary businesswomen in the UK, the author of 6 books, including The Cosmic Hologram, which is very pertinent to today's discussion. She is on the cutting edge of integrating science, consciousness research, and wisdom teachings in a holistic worldview, and founded the Whole Worldview in 2017. Jude, such a pleasure to see you again, and thank you for joining us today.
Well, Emmanuel, it's my delight and honor and pleasure to be with everyone. I'm really looking forward to what I feel is a very timely conversation and a call to action.
Thank you, Jude. So Mason, Jill, Terry, and Jude, thank you all. I think we're going to have a very deep and lively discussion today on this concept of the Holo Movement. And I suppose one thing we might first ask or be curious to know is, what exactly is the Holo Movement? Probably a new term for many of you, but yet it sounds kind of natural, doesn't it? It's a movement of the whole. I couldn't think of a better way to express it, really. The term Holo Movement was coined by American physicist David Bohm. And David Bohm was a leading edge visionary physicist. He worked closely with Albert Einstein at Princeton near the end of Einstein's life. And Einstein sort of adopted David Bohm as his spiritual son. And it was at a time when Einstein, in his latter years, had really turned towards consciousness and spirit, and was endeavoring to find answers and words to the unified whole. And he saw in David Bohm this hope for the future. And I think David Bohm did not disappoint Einstein, and he brought many concepts to us. In 1980, Bohm wrote a book called Wholeness and the Implicate Order. And the main thesis of the book was that there is an implicate order primordial to our universe, the essence of everything. both consciousness and physical reality. And this implicate order unfolds into the evolution of consciousness and the physical world. And it occasionally goes back and forth. It's a movement, but it's a movement of the whole, of every single part. Nothing is excluded. Everything flows in unbounded wholeness. This implicate order becomes the explicate order, the universe that we see, feel, and hear in our senses before us. It's also the implicate order, the kernel of divine essence and the birth of consciousness within all of us. So Bohm coined this term, the Holo Movement, to describe this unbounded flow of the essence, the spirit, the consciousness that has led to Homo sapiens and us here today discussing this. And this flow is the Holo Movement. You know, I think we are all aware that there is a grand movement of movements taking place in the world around us. We see it, we feel it, we're part of it. It's been said so many times. You know, a number of years ago, Paul Hawken, the environmentalist, described the hundreds of thousands of like-minded organizations working around the world, basically for the same concept, essentially unity consciousness. You know, we live in such a divided world, and we've been led astray by the illusion of separation. And it's normal. We see ourselves as individual physical beings encapsulated in our skin. And it seems often that we are very separate from everyone else, and that the world is a holding place of separate entities. But we know from Bohm's description of the implicate order that that is not the case. There is prior unity. All of this came from oneness in the very beginning, beyond time, always and everywhere. The wholeness, the implicate order that makes life happen. So it's not a desperate world of separation and divisiveness, even though we see that. And of course, the news and the media more and more dwells on this separation. And as we confront many crises in these times, climate change, the growth of technology, the continued dispute between nation states struggling for what they perceive as limited resources. And we've really turned the wholeness inside out on its head in many ways. And yet, at the same time, we know change is coming. We know the wholeness is reasserting itself, because that is the natural flow of the Holo Movement. The implicate order, it shows itself in the beauty and manifestation of the galaxy, the stars, the planets, our own Mother Gaia here on planet Earth. What an extraordinary feat that the Holo Movement brings to us. And it's moving within us, and it's moving throughout our society. And there is Paul Hawken's description of this worldwide movement. And yet there's no name, there's no description, and perhaps we're in need of that. So the group with me here today, we've decided over the recent years that to give some identity, put a name on the nameless, just to help us along, to give us a sense of the sociology of this extraordinary event. And in honor of David Bohm and the concept itself, and it's kind of a pun. It's a movement of the whole. It's the Holo Movement. It's bringing us all together back once again from whence we came as one, working together. And heaven knows we need it now more than ever. I think all of you watching today will probably agree. This is the most critical moment in human history. We are faced with a crisis such as we've never known before, with weapons, technology, means to do harm to each other, with overpopulation, with climate change, with dwindling resources, with mismanagement of the human spirit in general, all threatening the very existence of the human species. And so we are all blessed to be living in this absolutely singular moment in history, this critical time. And the Holo Movement's call to you is, let's all participate in this. Let's be part of it. Let's find the wholeness in ourselves as we converge together. The Holo Movement is the crucible of convergence, and it will lead all of us, both individually and collectively, to a better sense of the cosmic self within ourselves and the grand cosmic self of the whole, of which we are all a part and cooperating together to bring us through these critical times and converge in coherence and cooperation into a beautiful, brighter, better future for all. That's the Holo Movement. And now we're going to look at it a little bit in different sections or capacities. And I'd like to ask first Jude, as our resident physicist, cosmologist, and wisdom keeper, could you give us a little bit of reflection on the big picture cosmology of the Holo Movement? Jude Kirvan.
Thank you, Emmanuel. And I would like to also thank David Bohm. And I would also like to thank all the giants on whose shoulders we stand today, because it was the pioneers of the quantum revolution. It was Albert Einstein. It was people like David Bohm who actually saw deeper and saw the wholeness instead of the apparent separation. And so what my role is, I feel, in all of this is to offer a framework, a cosmological framework within which the Holo Movement can be a call to action, to not just understand then unity awareness, but to experience it and embody it. And as Emmanuel says, to come together, to link up and lift up in unity, in diversity. And I'm talking now even more than unity and diversity, because I feel beyond unity in diversity, there is unity in inclusion, but beyond unity in inclusion is unity in belonging. And what I feel the Holo Movement offers us is a remembering that we belong. We belong to ourselves, we belong to each other, we belong to our Mother Earth, Gaia, we belong to our universe, we belong to our cosmos. So it's an invitation to act local, feel global, and think cosmic. And it is a flow, it is an evolutionary impulse that's flowing through us, but it flows through our entire universe and our planetary home as a living being, a sentient being within a sentient universe. So as a cosmologist, Emmanuel, you said you wanted this to happen for a long time. I've wanted this to happen since I was 4 years old, because when I was 4
Yes, indeed.
I experienced reality as a hologram, as a cosmic, multidimensional hologram of meaning. And whereas the ancients talk of in something called Indra's net, a concept called Indra's net, where everything is connected and reflects everything else. In modern parlance, that's what a hologram does. But in ancient poetic language, it was a deep understanding, an intuitive awareness that that is the true nature of reality. And I don't describe myself as a physicist, because a physicist is looking at reality as essentially being only what we would call physical. And that is such a limited perspective. And we're now finding that at all scales of existence and numerous fields of research, that it is inherently mistaken. As you say, Emmanuel, we bought into the illusion of separation. And along with that illusion of separation, there has been the illusion of materiality as being the sole realm of existence. And that now is being turned on its head. And as it's turned on its head, there is a convergence, because this new evidence, this leading edge science that supports the Holo movement, that I called Whole World View and wrote the Cosmic Hologram to share the evidence for, is also converging with ancient wisdom teachings, with universal spiritual experiences, with indigenous wisdom teachings. Again, all essentially saying the same thing, that reality is ultimately unified. Our universe exists and evolves as a unified entity. Our universe is part of a multidimensional reality and cosmos. And that mind and consciousness, which was really at the heart of David Bohm's teachings, is not only primary, but it is the basic stuff of reality, where mind and consciousness aren't something we have, but literally what we and the whole world are. So this emergent cosmology is describing a universe where deeper than its appearance of energy and matter and space-time is that implicate order that is comprised of mind, cosmic mind, consciousness, and meaningfully, informationally, informs what we call the reality of our universe. And that is the cosmology of wholeness, of oneness. That is the cosmology of the Holo movement. And at its very heart and soul is a universe that doesn't just exist and evolve as a unified entity, but exists to evolve from simplicity to complexity and ever greater levels of individuated self-awareness, including planets and plants, and people. So here we are at this extraordinary moment where a worldview, because our worldview drives our behaviors. We're here at a moment where a worldview of separation has driven a world of suffering. And we're literally now waking up to realize, to remember that we're inseparable. This for me is the framework, the evidential framework. This isn't just a hope, this is the evidence now. The evidential framework of a whole worldview, of the Holo movement, within which we're invited into a call to action. We're invited to a new adventure of what it means to be human. We're invited to stand together at the bow wave of the evolutionary impulse of our entire universe, to link up and lift up together and go forward into who knows what, because this is an emergent evolutionary process and pulse and impulse. But I'm just delighted that we're all here together at this pivotal moment of potential conscious evolution, this convergence into a remembering of our cosmic self and our potential as microcosmic co-creators with our beloved planetary home Gaia and our entire universe and cosmos. So thank you again for this opportunity to explore and come together and serve something that is truly far, far greater than the sum of our parts, the Holo movement, and all that it means and promises.
Well, thank you, Jude. Thank you for that beautiful introduction to the cosmology and vision of the Holo movement. And speaking of the hologram as a model of the universe, I'm sure everyone's seen a holographic image When you look out on a flat paper and it looks like there's 3 dimensions, there's an extra dimension to it. And Jude's work on the cosmic hologram has described that the universe itself is a hologram, which is, really a way, we've heard, and you referenced this poetic wisdom of the past, William Blake's words, see the world in a grain of sand and heaven in a wild flower, hold eternity in the palm of your hand. And in eternity, hold the world in the palm of your hand and eternity in an hour. But when we see a hologram, those aren't just words. That's real. When we cut a holographic image, let's say it's an apple, and we just cut a tiny little wedge off of that image, you don't see just a little separate piece of the chunk. You still see the entire image, no matter how small you cut it. So the world really is in a grain of sand. Wouldn't you agree, Jude?
I would, and I'd say that I love that the holograms, that human holograms and human sort of technologies and virtual realities are like the kids' toys, of which our universe is the masterclass. So the pixelation of our universal cosmic hologram is 1 trillion times finer than the best high definition of our human holograms. It's actually at the scale that's as small as to an atom is to the entire universe. Literally, as space expands and time flows, with every moment of that so-called Planck scale pixelation, our universe embodies ever greater informational content. That's why our universe doesn't just exist. That's how it evolves. And so our universe yesterday embodied less information, meaningful information, than it does today, than it will tomorrow, to the end of its life cycle. It truly is, our universe is not a great thing. It's a great thought in the infinite and eternal mind of the cosmos, as mystics such as Blake understood, as mystics such as so many pioneering scientists have understood. And one of those, of course, was David Bohm.
Yes, indeed. So, yeah, we are the whole universe, and that's actually physically, cosmologically possible and real. It's all within us, and we are all within it, which has profound implications for the psycho-spiritual development of the human psyche. And Terry, you've been one of the leaders in integral life practice and understanding the implications of the development of the human spirit in the context of this holism. What does this implication of the cosmological understanding of the Holo movement mean for you in the development of our psycho-spiritual dynamics?
In the midst of this particular moment, in which the crisis is extreme and yet the collective awakening is blossoming so richly at the very same time, it is as if we are all waking up, and it is as if we are all destroying ourselves all at once. And our whole cultural environment is filled with apocalyptic images and this rich vein of spiritual renaissance and profound transformation in individual lives and relationships. Perhaps these are not really independent of one another. Perhaps there's a single process going on in which we are at a point, crisis means danger and opportunity. And as we're arriving more and more fully and more consciously in this seeming singularity, we are holding more and more profound and more numerous apparent contradictions and discovering in that paradox something that transforms us. it is usual that we're used to looking at things abstractly and naming them and talking about them. But the more we take to heart this whole profound holism, the more we are a participant right now, the more all of this implicates us. And this is not just an awakening, but a deepening. There's a profound depth of presence with one another. The fact that everything we are, our children, grandchildren, everything that we have created, the world into which it would have meaning, has an unknowable future. It may make a leap to a higher order. That's certainly what we're all dedicated to. And yet there are all kinds of signs of destruction at the same time. And when you're faced with death, there's nothing clarifies a man's mind like the knowledge he'll be hanged in the morning, the famous historical saying. Well, there's an opportunity here for us to be present to one another in a way that we probably never have, with a kind of vulnerability and tenderness and poignant presence. I am experiencing this holographic reality in a particular way because really for the last 20 years, but especially for the last 6, seeing how quickly some of the really horrific aspects of global warming and other aspects of our crisis, we're intensifying so rapidly. I just made this consideration the center of my life. I wrote the book, A New Republic of the Heart. I redirected all my work and efforts into the nonprofit that Mason's now the executive director of. I took what was a focus primarily on individual development and brought it into a context of our, we are all expressions of that whole, and that whole profoundly wants to keep evolving, wants to keep awakening, wants to keep creating higher and higher orders. And so this focus required me also to face a lot of the things that seemed too terrible to face. And in the process, I went through a whole series of dark nights of the soul, recognizing why there is a great deal of evidence to back up the conviction of many dear friends who have come to look at our future as inevitable, that we're going to wipe ourselves out, or at least have such difficult futures that much of what we depend on as a sense of what it is to be human may no longer exist in the same way. And in the midst of that intensity, on my 70th birthday, ironically, which was April Fool's Day, I was diagnosed with a rare, incurable cancer. And for the next 6 weeks, I was undergoing all kinds of tests because it wasn't this, that, or the other thing. It ends up being a very rare, 0.1% kind of cancer that I have. And in that process, I had to discover how, this contemplation that I had been making of our collective mortality suddenly became so salient in terms of my personal mortality. And my first recognition was, of course, well, if it's my time, I want to go gratefully through that birth canal of this tunnel we seem to disappear into in our dying. And I found in that a kind of peace and acceptance. I certainly didn't want to waste any moments being in resistance to what is. And as this has proceeded for me in this personal way over the last 3 months, I'm discovering that there are broad universal principles that are at play. The current separative interpretation of reality is that entropy rules, that we're all winding down, that everything is falling apart. But the whole history of Earth and human evolution and culture is that more and more order are being created, more and more coherence, less and less entropy. And yet these two forces are in tension. In a way, what is going on in terms of our challenges is like a cancer on the health of the whole. And I'm now discovering that at a very cellular level, I have to participate in that consciously in a whole different way. And ironically, it has, for me, been like, oh, well, Terry's life ended at 70 years. And now he's in a new life. And that life is full of gratitude and wonder and trust of the process. And I'm drawn to recognize how profoundly important it is for us to keep redirecting ourselves to being separate individuals in a problem, in a situation they have to struggle with, into, in a way, amazed contemplation of the mystery of existence, which is infinitely fruitful, infinitely full of grace and potential. And in that redirection of my own attention, I feel like I'm arriving even more completely in the right relationship to the whole work I've been doing for decades now. So
Well, you certainly are.
that's what I have.
And blessings to you, Terry. All our love and healing intentions. You know, your whole life just represents your spirit, your search, the integration of the whole worldview into a single life. And you alone speak for this evolutionary wonder and this vision of the grand mystery within. So bless you. And we all send you our deepest healing thoughts and thank you for your
and back
vision.
at you, you know, from this place, my healing thoughts come back at everyone. This is,
thank you.
I often find myself having to cheer up others who are very sober and glum about what's happened to me. But no, it's all okay.
Well, you've often said things are far too serious out there for us to lose our sense of humor, right? So you're really putting that into practice.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you so much. So as we contemplate this mastery of the cosmic self within this crucible of convergence, how will it converge? How will all the disparate strengths of coming together? And then we got the internet and a few other tools together, this Holo Movement.
Wow. Yeah. Well, this is the question that I'm probably most excited about. I mean, as Jude and Terry both beautifully, articulated, we understand the dynamics of the Holo Movement intellectually, to whatever extent we can. We can experience it through our spiritual practice, and we know it to be true on that societal systems. It's like quite a task, and also just a very exciting one. I think that one of the beauties about this term Holo Movement is the pun that you mentioned earlier, Emmanuel, the movement pun. I mean, it elicits for me a certain, exciting, positive aspect. has the sense that there's a lot happening, that there are a lot of narratives in play, that there are a lot of different movements, you know, the larger movements that we see, the environmental movement or the social justice movements, but so many at local levels and with very specific issues. And that's very exciting, especially for those of us who actively track and participate in these movements. And for me, at least, there's also this sense of that those movements, a certain narrative of separation, or they can still appear to be in competition for our attention, or for resources, or, you know, are in some ways working in silos when they maybe could be collaborating more. There's a sense that we could be in greater sync with one another and in greater collaboration. So for me, you know, one of our challenges, I think, is living this polarity where on, you know, one hand, we know the necessity of this vast diversity of movements. There's so many important causes, and there's so much healing that is needed, and there are, you know, so many specific issues that deserve our attention. And, you know, at the same time, we notice that this is the expression of wholeness and the Holo movement as one movement. So how can we live and work together in this way that honors, you know, that diversity of movements without losing touch with, you know, the reality that we're working on a shared vision of the future, and we're actually ultimately working on the same project. So maybe I'll just make a comment about each of those poles. I mean, I tend to want to follow the grand movement, or maybe I should adjust my screen here because I was getting a little halo effect. Sorry, Garth.
You're getting the lights coming in to your vision there. Good effects there, Mason. Go ahead.
Is that okay? Okay.
Yeah.
So one thing I notice in myself is I love to track and follow the larger movements that are on this global scale, and how are all the pieces connecting. And at the same time, I don't want to, you know, bypass the work that is needed at a very specific level. So it's really important for me to engage and to participate in specific movements or specific causes. And, you know, we know that a lot of those causes and a lot of those social movements have arisen because of a part of the whole that was, you know, fragmented or neglected or, you know, oppressed. And in a sense, those movements are the Holo movement, or wholeness reasserting itself. And there's a lot of that collective trauma that needs collective healing. So that deserves my attention. At the same time, if I become too identified with those movements, or too, you know, invested in their individual success, I can, you know, not only lose touch with the wholeness that is my nature, but I can also potentially, you know, prevent other important movements from achieving success. So ultimately, there's this like ongoing practice of how we can do both, how we can, you know, commit to specific efforts and go into the depths and the complexity and the specificity of those efforts, and also look, you know, over, see our neighbors who are working on other projects, ask ourselves how we can be collaborating, notice the interdependency of our efforts. And ultimately, this Holo movement may not look like some of the movements of the past in the sense that we are, you know, efforting to bring everybody together, and, you know, asserting the strength of our will to do that. It may be something more like, you know, you and Jude and Terry have articulated, something more like trusting in the natural, you know, creative wholeness of reality itself, and realizing we're already together. We need to potentially stay together as we work in our diversity and as we move.
Indeed. Yeah. Thank you for that. Yeah. It's, we don't need to come together because we're all part of the whole, although it seems quite divided. What we need to do is stay together and not divide ourselves anymore and just seek out that prior unity behind it all and collaborate with each other. Thank you, Mason, for your thoughts on that. So we've had the grand cosmological spirit, the integral dynamics of psychospiritual development, and some initial thoughts on the sociology of all this, which is all beautifully stated by all of you so far. But what does this mean for the everyday person? You know, what does it mean for mothers and children and people coping with life and trying to make ends meet and find meaning and purpose in their whole life? How does that reflect, and what can the Holo Movement do for the woman on the street and the common people around the world who may not have the deepest understanding of the cosmological aspects, but certainly seeking, hoping for, and desiring unity in their own way? Jill, are you up to giving us some thoughts on what this means for all the rest of us mere mortals?
Oh boy, I will. It's a big question, and it's how does the Holo Movement look in the day to day? It's for me personally, I obviously do not have the definitive answer on this one, but I can speak just from what I've been reflecting on and learning this, especially this past year as a new mother of a current 2-year-old, that seeing this in the day to day takes practice in all capital letters and compassion in all capital letters with ourselves and each other. And also a practice in bridging this theory and the worldview with a felt experience. And Jude, you talked about this of, really embodying this and feeling this if we want this to be a sustainable shift toward, away from the materialistic paradigm to our cosmic self. We have to really feel this. Because living a worldview requires like active and ongoing participation in all moments. It's hard work, and we're constantly having to shake ourselves out of habitual ways of operating and reacting. And, for me, I believe in a conscious and purposeful universe. I believe that we're interconnected with each other in all things. But ask me about how I embody this when I'm wrestling with my son and I'm late for an appointment, or, I've gotten 3 hours of sleep, like so many other parents and people that have like these passion projects and then have to tackle the responsibilities of the day. There's a gap in what I know to be true and then how I'm expressing this knowing, so, our rational understanding that we're part of an undivided wholeness has to then transform into a lived understanding that will begin to shift our habitual patterns away from this story of separation, and that takes ongoing practice and an integral practice. And I think one of there's so many ways, but what I've been coming back to and I've been really intrigued by is Father Richard Rohr. He calls it the encounter, the mystical encounter with presence, with a capital P, presence. And how do we practice that? Because this matters. Being in awe, and Terry, you talked about this, like having gratitude is so important. It's much needed nourishment in these times of crises, and these encounters, no matter how fleeting, how short the glimpse is to our cosmic self and our connectedness with each other, it feeds our soul, and it gives us, the morale boost that we need. And to also pause for a moment that we're all practicing this, and that to be patient with each other and how we can, nobody holds the key to what you find awe-inspiring. I mean, watch any toddler and you're experiencing a master class and finding the divinity and awesomeness of everyday life. I mean, my son Max, he's my favorite teacher. He finds the greatest pleasure in driving a car over a bumpy surface and, just looking at birds, and, you can't help but laugh and find that joy and pause watching him. And then I feel like I want to be that energetic source that shows up. That is the Holo movement in your everyday life. That's your connection. And he already knows it, so it's a remembering. And when we have these moments, then we can, be present to something bigger than ourselves. And we can respond in stressful and challenging situations that we all have, and with empathy and compassion, which I think more than anything, we know what we need to do. It's the practicing of how do we respond and how do we be patient. And it's not just practicing finding those moments of gratitude, because we can find despair everywhere and tragedy. But, when we practice that, experience, then how do we show that in service? How do we take that and feed it back into the collective whole? How do we put the Holo movement into action? And, I'm thought like to close with my ideas is David White has a poem that always inspires me. It's Start Close In. And you write, start close in. Don't take the second step or the third. Start with the first thing, close in, the step you don't want to take. And I might offer that first step, it's different for everybody. Thank goodness, so we can support each other in taking that first step. But underneath that, how are we responding energetically in that first step? Are we responding with fear? Are we perpetuating the story of separation? Or are we responding with love and, showing a unified wholeness? And that is hard work, and it's a constant remembering and practice, and just how that looks for me. The other day I was struck, my son was out of the cot, and now we put him in a big boy bed, and I had to spend the night holding his hand as he slept. And I woke up in the morning and I was exhausted and my neck hurt. I had like 3 hours of sleep, and he peeks his head over. I'm already feeling sorry for myself. And he peeks his head over with this giant smile. And, I was struck in that moment. I have a choice. How am I going to greet my son, and how am I going to start the day? And that this decision really matters, because this energy is going to be flowing not just through him, but through my partner and onward. And I think that we need to all remember that and be patient with ourselves. But these encounters that we might think don't mean anything are all adding to the Holo movement. Jude, you talked about this, more information each day, and we are unique contributions in shaping this story. And as Buckminster Fuller says, there's nothing in a caterpillar that tells you it's going to be a butterfly. So, noticing and practicing and just keeping at it and being patient with each other. That's there. Everyone has the template answer now.
Oh, thank you, Jill. Your years of practice just shone through there with the wisdom of that observation. Thank you so much. The mystical encounter with presence every minute of every day, even when we're tired, we haven't slept well, it's all the Holo movement, and it all adds up. Gosh, thank you for that. That was very inspiring, encouraging. And thank you all. So I think we've got a nice overview of different perspectives, and we're beginning our convergence into this crucible that leads to the cosmic self. And now we're going to open it up for a little more free flow conversation here. And we want to touch on 3 points as we move forward. What we're going to call the good news, the bad news, and the beautiful news. And let's start briefly with the good news. And that is, and I think it's very much as Jill just expressed, it's the everyday practice and compassion, the starting close in with the first step. Because the good news is the Holo movement is endemic wholeness. It is our true nature. We don't have to seek it. We don't have to discover it, find it, bring it together, fabricate it. It is the essence of who we are. And as all we have to do is connect with it on that everyday level, every minute of every day, let it flow through us. That's the good news. The Holo movement is what we are. But I open the good news up here for a little bit of discussion. Anyone like to jump in and comment on the good news aspect of the Holo Movement? Jude, yes.
Well, first of all, I've been sitting here in awe at all of you and all of everyone. And Emmanuel, you mentioned we're mere mortals. We're not mere anything.
Thank you.
The universe soul got us here for a reason. You know, the universe and our beloved planetary home Gaia. I'm writing the next book called Gaia, Her Story. And I am in awe at a universe that is indomitable. It is indomitable. It doesn't stop evolving, as Terry said. It embodies this incredible evolutionary impulse and is made of, its stuff is meaningful information. So we are mortals, yes, in a universe all pervaded by meaning and purpose. And, you know, just bringing it back to the everyday and the good news is yes, we can remember that because that is truly who we are. And many years ago, I was standing in a field in an early morning, field walking as part of my PhD in archaeology. And out of a clear blue sky came the words that in our humanity, we're all ordinary. In our divinity, we're all extraordinary. So it seems that it's those moments of presence that Jill talked about and that moments of gratitude that Terry talked about, where we literally touch the divinity that is our inherent nature. And we can bring it back to everything that we are and do as mortals, walking our earth path. And I just want to finish by saying, you know, there is this choice, as Jill again said, between fear and love, because that is the ultimate choice. Do we act, do we choose, do we act from fear, or do we choose and do we act from love? And the Holo Movement is offering us, I feel, a real call to choose love. But in writing Gaia, Her Story, something came out that was wonderful. And that was our earliest ancestors, over 4 million years ago, made a choice. And instead of choosing for domination, which others of our primate ancestry did, they chose to cooperate. They chose that their males and their females would be the same size. They chose to pair bond. The males even reduced the size of their teeth, for goodness sake, so that they didn't threaten and became less aggressive. So we are built for cooperation. We are built for love. That is our default setting for over 4 million years. So it seems to me that we've gone a little astray with some of the choices, and that perhaps is the buying into the illusion of separation, not as a blame, but as part of a journey of individuation, for us now to come back, to wake up and remember we're inseparable and yet unique, and to support and love and care for ourselves and each other every day with kindness, with compassion, with empathy, with inclusion, with a welcoming to belong. So that, I feel, is a really good news.
Yes, indeed it is, and well said. So, yeah, we'll move beyond being mere mortals and go into the extraordinary. Any other thoughts on the? Thank you, Jude. Lovely. Gosh, the good news.
The consensus trance has hundreds of millions of people captured primarily by the optical illusion of our separation. I am this body, mind, not that body, mind, mine, what's not mine, us, them. And if we were living in a Newtonian universe, that might have validity, but we're not. We're living in a quantum universe in which the deepest I amness that is at the core of me is present here in this we space in which we are together. And in its most fundamental nature, it has all the qualities of divinity. It is divinity. It is awareness. It is love. It is goodness. It is truth. It is beauty. It is joy. It is love. It is freedom. It is every virtue we might hope to experience. And all of that is present right now. This moment is where all of that takes place. It's not in the past. It's not in the future. It's not a theory. It's not a concept. It is my nature. It is your nature. That's the good news. That the more we awaken into the reality of our actual situation, the more of a clear conduit we are for that wholeness to flow. And yes, there's been an eternal dynamic between entropy and we could call it negentropy or order. But this evolutionary impulse toward more wholeness, in the crisis of fragmentation, wholeness wants to reassert itself. And we feel that. And that's alive in us. And this inherent divinity is wanting to express its love and care for all of the beauty that has evolved through us. And that's a beautiful thing. And that's inherently joyous. So there's something of feeling apprehension of that in this moment and in this moment and in this moment, in which we let those understandings explode the mind into wonder, explode the heart into love, explode the body into service. And that's essentially the way that every individual can relate to, participate in, enact, and be the Holo movement.
Well, thank you. You're taking us from the goodness to the beautiful things, and beautifully done as well. Extraordinary, Terry. Thank you for that vision. Mason and Jill, any thoughts from either of you on the good news of today?
I'll just say briefly that we can feel grateful that there are right now so many different ways to realize that unity, since these relatively new discoveries, that David Bohm and Einstein and so many others were pioneering, to, the fact that we're connected globally through the internet and we have all the wisdom traditions at our disposal. There's so many ways to, understand and realize and practice and experience directly that truth, and to know it and begin to cultivate it. So let's be grateful for that. Let's continue to invite more people into that, practice. And I think there's an opportunity for that to scale.
Absolutely. That everyday presencing. Jill, any thoughts from you on?
It's really
the
hard
good news?
to follow up on everyone's amazing wisdom. But just briefly, I'll say, and you mentioned this, Emmanuel, like this is something that we don't have to learn. It's not. There's no gatekeeper, and that's good news. And this can be experienced how it resonates with each of us, and that's good news as well. So it's, we can feel empowered, and we don't have to wait to remember.
Yeah. And you've mentioned practice. Any particular practice, or what does practice mean for you? What can you say to others as far as the good news of having so many practices at our disposal? Any thoughts on that? I know you're a serious practitioner.
I'm a practitioner of integral transformative practice. And that has been, a wealth of knowledge and learning that it's not just developing the mind, or not just, I'm a runner. It's not just about running. It's, how do you integrate a balance and within. But what I'm finding now, in all honesty, is with with the time constrictions I have with a toddler, especially during pandemic, without, support, like so many people have experienced, I'm definitely not alone, is that, it's really been a noticing of, we all practice something every day. My practice is waking up and have a cup of coffee. That's a practice, as well as, am I scrolling through social media when I could be engaging in meditation, So I practice meditation and the kata with ITP, but it's been a humbling, and I'll be honest, I've faltered many, many days on a committed practice of what the ideal versus, falling into a practice of habit. So every day is an opportunity.
Indeed it is. And boy, we sure have a lot of bad habits to break, don't we? We're worldwide, which brings us a little bit to the bad news, because as whole and endemic and natural as the Holo movement is, we've got a lot of issues out there, and many, many people are in denial, or if not in denial, maybe just complacent. Maybe they feel it's too much to put things into practice. It's too much to do something about the situation, or maybe they're so entrenched in the materialistic paradigm, the consensus trauma trance of the world is the way it is, and that's just the way it is, and we can't do much about it, so why should I even try, sort of syndrome. What do we do about that bad news there? What recommendations or practices or thoughts, how can we help pull people out of their denial and complacency? Any thoughts on that?
It's interesting, but in a way, that consensus trance that tends to absorb so many of us needs to be punctured. And very often, the facts that can puncture it have to do with our collective predicament. I mean, it's really a sobering time. The more you're fully educated, the more it is as if everything we love and everything we are and everything we're devoted to is on many different levels, just on an unsustainable trajectory, and already all kinds of loss and death and suffering. And, in other words, you can't really be present to all of that without your heart breaking and without you deepening and being deepened by grief, a kind of overwhelming grief. And yet, if you let that take you beyond the consensus trance, what you're going to discover in those tears of grief are also tears of gratitude. You're going to find your way into this ecstatic recognition of the divinity of this very moment. And so, for some people, the consensus trance is broken primarily by the bad news, and for others, primarily by the good news of a kind of awakening from the trance. But in the end, we have to integrate them both. We have to be present as a deeper beings who are not in denial of anything, and yet who are dynamic and who are this transparent conduit for the infinitely gracious healing power of inherent wholeness to reassert itself in the midst of this horrific crisis of fragmentation. Both are true, and each has the power to break our slumber and wake us into contact with reality, with this moment, with divinity, with one another, and with what we can do to help.
Thank you. Thank you, Terry. Yeah, indeed. We have to reach out and lead by example, and with our compassion and kindness towards everyone. Any other thoughts on how to wake people up or help them out or shake them out of their denial or complacency?
Well, one thing I would say is sometimes this trust in the natural wholeness and movement of reality, or, just trust in God or the mystery, or can lead us into a sort of almost too much trust, where we start to think it's going to take care of itself, right? Like that, it can almost lead us into a sort of blind optimism or denial that everything will sort itself out. It always has. Things will be fine. And in a way, we can maybe unintentionally resign our own responsibility or participation in that. So there's a sort of, there's the good news that when we are actually awake to wholeness, that we can, surrender or trust that and find that sort of creative, be part of it, and that goodness will follow. But it requires our active participation. Like Jill is saying, it requires that sort of practice, because we are, so patterned to see this narrative of separation and to live that, and at scale that has, as we're seeing, so many really problematic effects. So I think part of the bad news is that if we resign that sort of responsibility, we don't necessarily know what will happen, and it really requires all of us realizing that this is time for us not to just practice casually, for our own awakening or our own personal development, but to practice urgently and passionately for the sake of the species.
Indeed, it's the fierce urgency of now. Jill? Yes.
And to add to both the great points is, we think of like, how can we shake others out, and how can we take action, and something I feel, and maybe this is just me in the news stories I'm reading, but I feel sometimes we think take action is being louder and bigger and getting attention, and I'm a believer in the act of listening, and the power of listening to each other, ourselves, our intuition, and those we disagree with, and because showing up for others are starts to build that bridge, and that's hard. It's hard to sit and listen, but I think we cannot underestimate the power of showing up and just listening without an agenda.
What a beautiful point. Yeah, so many voices out there, as you said, all trying to shout louder than the next. An activist listener. This is a very, very key question there, and something to keep in mind. If we could all just learn to listen more deeply and compassionately. Jude, any final thoughts on how you deal with the bad news element of the situation?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly doesn't take away from a personal engagement, involvement in it. It can't do, because we're all human beings seeing the same news, part of the same human family, part of the family of Gaia. So absolutely there. But I really share what's already been said. I mean, the terminology I tend to use is show up and get out of the way. So that's really, attuning and aligning with what any sense I have, that where I can serve, where I can, make a difference, that's a positive difference. And I think it goes back to what Jill said, do you choose fear or love? And your choices, are the realities that we co-create together. I would say, though, in terms of specifically the bad news, is that over 4.5 billion years, Gaia has never evolved other than through breakdown and breakthrough. And it's always been a breakdown and a breakthrough. It's never been, a sequential. And I think we're at that point, we're in that sort of rite of passage of the breakdown of that which is not sustainable, and the potential, not guaranteed, but the potential of what may break through. And I'm very encouraged within the breakdown to see the essential metamorphosis, that, the imaginal cells of the possible butterfly are starting to really link up and lift up together. And that's us, and that's everyone. And that's everything from, my husband organising local litter picks down the lanes of our village, to Boris Johnson saying at the G7 meeting, we need feminine leadership. We need feminine leadership.
Yeah.
And, with as we move towards COP26 in November, there is going to be a pilgrimage of many, many, many creatives that are going to dance and sing and intend and open our hearts, literally progressing up the entirety of Britain to Glasgow, with the intention of inviting and encouraging anyone, everyone, to this great way of coming together in whatever way people feel called, because unity is not uniformity. Unity is radical diversity. And when we hear and listen to each other and hear other stories and share our stories, then my goodness me, my experience is we find so much more in common rather than what divides us.
Indeed.
I think that's the opportunity within the
Yeah.
bounds of the breakdown.
It certainly is. Yeah. And I think that's a beautiful gateway to the beautiful news that, for as bad as things are, nature does break through after its breakdowns. And the deeper the crisis gets, the more creative the solutions are that come forward to resolve it. That's kind of the mastery and the miracle of the wisdom of the implicate order and the Holo movement itself. So the worse things get, the more creative we become. And this is a session on the Crucible of Convergence, Holo movement as the Crucible of Convergence for the cosmic self. So let's just take, we have about 15 minutes. Let's take 8-10 minutes here quickly and focus then on that beautiful news, the natural flow of the Holo movement, bringing us back to and increasing our awareness of inherent unity of this. Who would like to toss out some beautiful news thoughts of how we're going to overcome the breakdown and make this happen?
Well, I think that one of the key things is for us to break the illusion of linear time and to be not focused on trying to make something happen in the future, but recognizing that it's already happening right now and being a part of the thing we would want to bring into being already being true. That's, in a way, the hidden Trojan horse in this very name, the Holo movement. The Holo movement is the wholeness of being, is the only way anything happens. I mean, essentially, what Bohm's thesis is that nothing is separate from anything else. You don't have separate agents acting on other separate agents, not truly. The wholeness of everything, the implicate order in which everything is connected to everything else, is in flow. So every movement is a Holo movement by its very nature. And therefore, in a way, we have to be in a radically trusting place if we want to be fully used by that inherent wholeness. And that is this is the way in which there is a truth in the argument that what's most important is our own awakening. If we're unawakened, the way we're going to tend to impact things is going to be karmic. It's going to create an action for which there will be a reaction. And that's what we're kind of caught in, is this accelerando of intensifying complexification and acceleration, all of which seem like they tend to be self-terminating. And yet the inherent wholeness of being has never been absent. It is absolutely my nature. It is the nature of this moment. And if I'm alive in it, I'm an agent of it, its natural reassertion of wholeness. Life wants to keep living. Evolution wants to keep evolving. The great human experiment wants to keep unfolding. All of that lives within my heart and yours. We're not allies because we two separate people make a pact to be allies. No, we're inherently allies. This is a discovery of being already in love with life and everyone, and it is through being that we're an enactment of a future that has more beauty. And to the degree that there will be horrible losses and horrific events, as we're already seeing, the climate crisis is accelerating tremendously, and awful fires and droughts and hurricanes and on and on and on are only intensifying. So to be truly present is to be joyous, and it's also to have a constantly vulnerable, broken heart. We're holding each other in that which is terrible, and that itself is unutterably beautiful. Where all of that is happening at the same time. There's a singularity of grief and gratitude, a singularity of loss and hope. And in that, we are not in denial. It's not a positivity that, like Mason was talking about, that shuts off the darkness. It's a joy or a wholeness or a light on the other side of a real transformative confrontation with the darkness. And that what gives what we're doing the formidable strength to be effective even under really challenging circumstances, which, and life has always been challenging, and it has always been beautiful, and it is out of this that every new sprout has sprung. And we are that, and we are here giving ourselves more and more deeply, more and more truly, more and more beautifully to that reenactment of wholeness amidst this crisis of fragmentation.
Thank you, Terry. Thank you.
What's coming to mind for me is that when I practice and remember that I am already okay, that I'm already connected and aligned, that the impulse is generally to give and to seek where I can join and where I can be generous. And I also notice as that arises some fear. Will I be okay? Will I be able to take care of myself or my organization or my tribe or whatever if I'm giving, and if I stay loyal to that generosity? And that is a challenge, and it's something that that there's more and more evidence that actually brings me more resources, and makes me feel more empowered and more safe. And at the same time, that is something I'm always working with. So more and more I'm asking, instead of what can I create or own or develop, like who can I join, or who can I empower that is already doing this great work or understand something at greater depth than I can. And especially as we're intending to show up, get out of the way, as Jude said, and allow this convergence to happen, I want to be scanning the room of other colleagues and change agents and all of you, and noticing what is needed, how I can be of service, and to trust that that constant turning to generosity will enable me to keep doing this sort of work.
Keep on keeping on. Just gotta, every minute of every day, pulling it all together. Any final thoughts, Jude, Jill?
Yeah, just to sort of really add on to what Mason said, what I feel is as we link up and lift up together, it isn't so much about me serving someone or them serving me. We're serving each other. There is this mutuality that lifts us to something that is greater than the sum of our parts, and that attunes us and aligns us with that evolutionary impulse. And for me, the most beautiful aspect of what I feel and see is unfolding is referring back to what Jill said about hearing and listening. Whilst I've been writing Gaia Her Story, I've been deeply hearing and listening to the voice of our beloved planetary home. And it seems to me that as we remember wholeness, a fundamental aspect of that remembering is remembering that we're both children of and a co-evolutionary partners of Gaia. So to hear her and not to see the fires and the hurricanes, they're an expression of her trauma that has been brought about by our illusion of separation. As we awaken my own faith and trust, and for many, many years of aligning and attuning in service with her, is that they may alleviate. I don't know if they will. I just know that if we carry on as we have been carrying on, they will get worse. And if we actually are, as we are doing, awaken to remember the good and the beauty and all the challenges of wholeness and unity and diversity, then I'm hoping and trusting that we will heal our relationship with our primordial mother as perhaps the deepest relationship we may have with ourselves, our cosmic self, and the cosmos as a whole.
Just a final thought from each of you. Your one or two sentences of words of wisdom for our audience today, and then we'll close this up. Closing thoughts?
Deeper than our superficial denial is a facing of our profound and heartbreaking human predicament. And deeper than being focused in that contemplation is a recognition of the inherent beauty and goodness and divinity and interconnected wholeness, and that draws us more fully into it. And in our growth, there are cycles of both darkness and light that deepen us progressively back and forth. Deeper than one is the other, again and again and again.
Jill.
I would also say is, the Holo Movement in action, and is that to not underestimate our unique and individual gifts that are meant to contribute to this divine essence. I mean, not everyone's going to be a leader in a spotlight. Not everyone is going to be, on the stage. But I think Jean Houston said it, the unseen generosities that are required and that are so necessary, and to not underestimate what each of us brings, and to find that, because that's what gives us hope and will help you wake up in the morning in the midst of all this. And every single person has, that unique genius that is meant to unfold. So how can we help ourselves and each other find that? And usually the people in my training of my pre-life as a journalist, when I was training for like teacher practicum, they said the children that need the most discipline usually need the biggest hugs. And, how can we do that for ourselves and each other?
Thank you, Jill. A group hug to everyone. Yes, Mason, final thoughts?
I would like to turn to reality itself, the Holo Movement that is, beating my heart now and brought all of us here together and is animating all of this, and just say thank you for the moments that we are awake and that we trust you, and may we continue to be you and do this work together.
And perhaps to add something that we haven't really spoken to directly, but a recognition that we're not alone. That the joy of reality is that it's comprised of many multidimensional levels of sentience and intelligence and guidance. And in our illusion of separation, we've cut ourselves off so much from that wondrous, expansive wisdom that is ours to engage with and be guided by and co-partner with. So this convergence, which is about coming together integrally and is what the ancients spoke of, what indigenous wisdom speaks of, is for us to open our minds and our hearts and all that we are to this communication, to naturalize multidimensional communications as the way forward, where literally when we speak of linking up and lifting up, we're linking up and lifting up with a lot more folks than we might have thought we were.
Well, thank you. Thank you all. Mason Ewald, Joe Robinson, Terry Patton, Jude Kirvan, for joining us today on this journey into the crucible of convergence towards the cosmic self that we call the Holo Movement. And if you're interested and want to find out more or join us or just contact us, you can go to holomovement.org and put in your information and we'll follow up with you. But it's whatever you want to call it. It's the shared human values of truth, beauty, and goodness that we always knew were true. It's the most beautiful thing that our heart knows is possible. And it's there and it's bringing us together. And if we put our activism into listening and caring and compassion and kindness, we can all find that crucible and we can converge into the true cosmic self of the implicate order that got this rolling. And we can feel the energy, the spiral, the draw of the holotropic attractor pulling us to oneness, to unity consciousness, and to love. That's the Holo Movement. That's the direction it's drawing us. But it's healing the past. It's here and now. And it's pulling us into the future. It's omnipresent. It's the implicate order expressing itself for the love of all of you. Thank you for joining us. This is the Holo Movement as the Crucible of Convergence for the cosmic self. And we're just honored and grateful to humanity's team and the Global Oneness Summit for giving us this forum to express these views here today. Thank you to all. Thank you to my panelists, and have a lovely day. Many blessings, and may the cosmic self rise from within. Love and blessings. Peace. Thank you.
Welcome to the Global Oneness Summit. We are so pleased to be sharing this program with you, Pro-Social Spirituality, Joining Spirituality, Science, and Activism. It is presented by thought and spiritual leaders engaged in the pro-social spirituality experience that joins communities from prosocial.world with contemplativelife.org, One Spirit Interfaith Seminary in New York City, and the Interspiritual Dialogue Network, among many others. I'm Dr. Kurt Johnson, a Global Oneness Summit host, and I want to begin by giving brief introductions of our presenters. Fuller bios for each of them are at the Global Oneness Summit website. I will also participate in the panel once I have turned the program over to the moderator, Jeffrey Janung. So now let me introduce our presenters. First is our moderator, Jeff Janung. Jeff is co-founder of contemplativelife.org, a digital hub that connects people and communities with transformative practices. He currently serves as managing director for Pro-Social World, a nonprofit organization whose mission is to consciously evolve a world that works for all. To learn more, see prosocial.world. Next is Dr. David Sloan Wilson, one of the most noted evolutionary biologists in the world. Dr. Wilson is also the co-founder of Prosocial World. His noted books on evolution, spirituality, and transformative change background his participation in co-creating prosocial spirituality. He is co-author with Prosocial co-founder Dr. Paul Atkins of the book Prosocial, Using Evolutionary Science to Build Productive, Equitable, and Collaborative Groups. To learn more, see prosocial.world. Next is the Reverend Dr. Diane Burke. Diane is the founder of the One Spirit Interfaith Seminary in New York City, the largest interfaith seminary in the world. A psychologist and practitioner of the Course of Miracles, she also works closely with Andrew Harvey's Institute for Sacred Activism and is certified in the Parker Palmer work known as Circle of Trust. To learn more, see numeral1spirit.org. That's numeral1spirit.org. Next is Kate Sheehan Roach. Kate is an editor, writer, and historian. She serves as director of content for contemplativelife.org. She facilitated the first prosocial spirituality training in 2020 and recently co-created the prosocial spirituality curriculum for the Templeton Religion Trust Research Initiative. Kate is a certified centering prayer facilitator who serves on 2 national service teams for contemplative outreach, and she's a member of the North American Leadership Council for United Religions Initiative. To learn more, see community.prosocial.world. That's community.prosocial.world. And next is Dr. Kurt Johnson. Kurt is a co-founder of the Interspiritual Movement, along with so many other pioneers. He worked closely with Brother Wayne Teasdale and Father Thomas Keating, and now works closely with prosocial.world and prosocial spirituality. An author of several important books on science and spirituality, he is a co-founder of Light on Light Publications and the Convergence series on Voice America. So welcome to this Global Oneness Summit special program, and I'm happy now to pass the baton to the program moderator, Jeffrey Janung.
Thanks, Kurt, for the kind introduction to the program and to the panelists. To provide a framework of our discussion today. When we look back for many centuries, the worlds of science and spirituality have been diverging. And in the current age, we're beginning to see the coming together of these great streams of human knowledge and wisdom and experience. And one of the places that we're beginning to witness this convergence of science and spirituality is in the emerging fields of evolutionary science based on cultural evolution and evolutionary spirituality based on interspirituality. So in today's panels, we have representatives from the leading edge of both of these emerging fields. David Sloan Wilson, Kurt Johnson, both evolutionary biologists by training, but they're also helping to create a bridge into the world of spirituality through their writing and through their work. Diane Burke and Kate Sheehan Roach, both on the cutting edge of interspirituality through their work with One Spirit Learning Alliance and Contemplative Life. And they're creating a bridge between evolutionary science and evolutionary spirituality with the creation of prosocial spirituality, which is our topic today. David, we'll begin with you. What inspired you as a scientist to begin exploring and writing about the world of spirituality?
Well, I was always interested in altruism. And my big question as a scientist was, how does goodness in all their forms evolve by a Darwinian process? That's not spirituality per se. And then by that route, I became interested in religion, because religion, of course, is a human cultural institution that is all about a form of community, basically, of pro-social behaviors. And it's at that point that I began to think more about the meaning systems that then have a spiritual component. But all of this was as an academic, really just as a professor. And I didn't really begin to think about spirituality in a more creative way, in a way that might lead to the kind of work I do now with real world implementations, until I met this fellow here in the white shirt, Kurt Johnson, who you both have white shirts, but and it was Kurt who truly has one foot in science and the other foot in spirituality that I actually helped me grow into, basically leave the ivory tower and to think about this in a deeper and more meaningful sense. And I think that's the way to, I might pass the baton, or Jeff, with your permission, directly to Kurt, and maybe he could actually say a little bit more about how we met and what our relationship means.
There's so much, yeah, that I could say to frame that. I'll actually start at the end. I always think that David started out as a natural nature mystic. He always talks about his relationship to nature when he was a child, and that his belief in altruism and planetary altruism and evolution working in that positive direction, anything other view he felt was counterintuitive to that deep connection that he had with that deep experience of nature and all of that's involved in that. My own experience was kind of similar to David's. That I started out completely just in science. And when I was between my master's and my PhD, I realized from a lot of personal traumas that I had to do some inner work. And it was actually the Anglican chaplain at the University of Iowa that acquainted me with the possibilities of contemplative monasticism. So to make a long story short, I took a detour, which turned out to be more than 10 years between my master's and PhD, into contemplative Christian monasticism, where I could, in that sense, just explore consciousness, because I think we all know the word that everyone uses today, even more than spirituality, is consciousness, and consciousness and how it motivates us in behavior, because we feel the interconnection and everything, and we feel the profound connection of everything, and that has implications for how we behave. So I think that's why it was very easy for David and I to relate, in the sense of this hope, both from the heart and from science, that we're going to get toward this world that works for all.
Thanks. Diane, you are the founder of the One Spirit Learning Alliance in New York City, which is the oldest and largest interspiritual seminary and learning alliance anywhere. What inspired you to found One Spirit?
I had been interested in the intersection of psychology and spirituality from the time I was very young. And in 1988, I was ordained as an interfaith minister. And for the next 13 years was involved in developing curriculum and training and ordaining interfaith ministers. And two things happened that led me from doing that work in the organization where I had been to starting One Spirit. The first was 9/11, 2001 happened, and it led me to take the work we were doing even more seriously, and particularly in the sense of how could the religions of the world and the spiritual paths and wisdom traditions of the world converge toward service to humanity as a whole, rather than simply being concerned with their own tradition, with their own community, but really move in the direction of a much more world-centric and even cosmocentric degree of concern. The other thing that happened around that time was that I read Wayne Teasdale's book, The Mystic Heart, in which he coined the term interspirituality. And as soon as I read that, I recognized that that was a much more accurate description of the work that we were trying to do, even than the word interfaith. And so I really was moved to start One Spirit to be a place where we could explore this new emerging arena of interspirituality, and also a place where we could really explore what is involved in supporting people in cultivating spiritual maturity and a mature universal spirituality. There have been ways of describing that say what it takes to have a well-integrated, mature spirituality is waking up, growing up, cleaning up, meaning doing your psychological work, your shadow work, and showing up, which is living in the world ethically and with a commitment to being of service to other human beings, to life itself. And so One Spirit is a place where we have designed a curriculum to give people an opportunity to work with all four of those dimensions of spiritual maturation.
Thank you. Kate, you were the inspiration behind Contemplative Journal, getting contemplative authors and contemplative practitioners, a place to share their collective wisdom. And we work together with Contemplative Life. I consider you a co-founder of Contemplative Life. What's the inspiration behind your work, which led you to serve on all these boards and be an innovator now with leading pro-social spirituality?
Oh, thanks, Jeff. And what an honor it is to sit with all of you. Some of you I worked with back when I was founding Contemplative Journal. And all I can say is we have come a long way since 2010, 2011, when I had this idea to create a web magazine of contemplative writings of the deepest type. A lot of people said, oh, you can't do that. Couldn't even talk about things contemplative, much less experience them online on the computer. And here we are in 2021, where technology has been such a gift through this COVID-19 pandemic, keeping us connected, keeping us together. Well, that was the idea back in 2010, 2011. And I'd like to use a metaphor to describe most of what we do is living metaphor. But I could remember back in my 20s, I sailed offshore quite a bit with sailing school vessels and oceanographic research out of Woods Hole, Massachusetts, and would be out, miles offshore in some choppy seas, stormy seas, and would see a seagull or a tern, flying into the wind out offshore. And, how could they survive out there in a storm? Well, sometimes they would come take a rest in our rigging and stay with us for days at a time through a storm. And that's how I saw Contemplative Journal. It was a place for those intrepid contemplatives out there who were searching for meaningful connection on this hurricane of offerings on the World Wide Web. So many difficult things coming through electronically that I just felt called to create a place to rest, a place to land, and to go deeper with one another. So, it really took off when our friend Kurt Johnson introduced me to Jeff. And, what I saw you doing at Contemplative Life was exactly in fact, when you explained, you showed me the website and you showed me the logo, which is sort of a stylized version of a musical rest note. The idea of taking a pause. It was just so clear that we were kindred spirits with a kindred mission to use this amazing gift of technology to meet a need for deeper spirituality, for connection and sharing, all very much in the spirit of reciprocity and generosity. And that's really what brings us to this point today, where we can launch pro-social spirituality together and take it to the next level.
Thank you. The foundations and the inspiration that brings us together in the work that we have right now are really good to understand more about the significance of this work of pro-social spirituality. So to continue that, I want to talk about some of the visionaries whose shoulders we're standing on, and as part of this continuing legacy. One, Eleanor Ostrom. David, you're co-founder, you're president of Pro-Social World. Pro-Social is based on the principles that Eleanor Ostrom won the Nobel Prize for in economics. Can you tell us a little bit about, what interested you about her work? You met her before she won the Nobel Prize, and a little bit about your relationship with Lynn, because you did know her personally, and how her work has impacted the work that you're doing today.
Great, Jeff. Well, I'll begin by making the point that so often when we encourage people to be pro-social, we say that you'll benefit by being pro-social. You'll feel better, you'll be healthier. And that might be true, but what it misses is the vulnerability of pro-sociality, that whenever we extend ourselves on behalf of others or our groups as a whole, actually we make ourselves vulnerable to other individuals that are more self-serving, you might say. And I think the vulnerability of pro-sociality is at least as important to stress as the benefits, because it means that the benefits only come if our groups are structured in the right way. And that's where Eleanor Ostrom comes in. She studied the tragedy of the commons, and that's an example of the vulnerability of pro-sociality, that if we're drawing upon some kind of common pool resource and we're prudent, we don't take more than our share, then we leave ourselves vulnerable to those who do. And then there's the tragedy of overuse. And so what Lynn did that earned her the Nobel Prize was she showed that actually some groups are unable to avoid the tragedy of the commons, but only if they possess certain core design principles, only if they were structured in a given way. And what I did with her for 3 years prior to her death was I generalized those core design principles to show that they're actually a matter of cooperation in all of their forms. And so if a group strongly implements these core design principles, they're protected. You can be pro-social and you will not be exploited. But if a group lacks these core design principles, then it is dangerous to be pro-social. And so that means that Eleanor Ostrom's core design principles provide this social organizational dimension of groups at all scales, where we're going to be calling the horizontal dimension of a effective system to go along with the vertical dimension. And so I think that that's the best I can do in a short space, Jeff. I think I should go back to you, and I'm sure that when I have my turn again, I'll be able to elaborate on what I just said.
No, it's great. Thanks. Diane, over to you for a minute. In what you shared a minute ago, the impact that the Mystic Heart and that Wayne Teasdale had on your journey, and really the foundation of the seminary and the work that you're doing. I remember another webinar that you and I are on, and you gave what I feel like is the most eloquent description of what interspirituality is that I'd ever heard. So I'd love to have you just share that again, your understanding of this new term, interspirituality, that he actually coined in the Mystic Heart.
Mhm. Sure, Jeff. For me, a starting point is often Father Thomas Keating's definition of spirituality itself, which he described as a deep commitment to the inner transformative process. And David just mentioned, that if you're part of a group where some people are self-serving, being altruistic, being given can leave you vulnerable to being taken advantage of. The inner transformative process that is at the core of spirituality itself is the movement from that kind of self-concern, self-protective, self-referential, egocentric way of operating in the world to larger and larger identification with first your group, your community, and then ultimately with humanity as a whole, and then with life as a whole. So that process is a process of moving from being self-serving. So it's from me to we, to all of us, to all of life. And what interspirituality refers to is that every religion, every wisdom tradition, every spiritual path has been concerned with that inner transformative process. And each one has developed practices and technologies for helping people make that journey. For the first time, we're living in a world that is interconnected enough that anyone can have access to all of those practices, all of those ways of both tapping into a direct experience of the unity of life and moving through that developmental process from self-absorption to concern for the world. And that interspirituality comes when we're able to share those practices and share that experience directly because we have developed close enough and trusting enough relationships with people across traditions that we can enter that vulnerability together and share those experiences and practices.
Thanks. I can remember another version of Father Thomas Keating's perceptions on the spiritual journey, which he said, the spiritual journey is a series of humiliations, which is not far off either.
Yeah.
Kurt, you and I both know Wayne pretty well. And, of all the people I know in the world, you have so selflessly devoted your life, your spiritual capital, your social capital to furthering his work and his vision. I'd like to have you just share a little bit about how that happened, how you guys connected and how he impacted you so deeply that you've been an evangelist for this work.
Yeah, well, same way. Somebody had given me a copy of The Mystic Heart, the subtitle of which is, finding the universal spirituality in the world's religions. And it was just at the time that I had been asked to leave the religious order that I was in, because I was actually representing more than one tradition. Now today that would be fine. Back then, 78, 79, it was not. So I was asked to go. And one of the first things I did was I wrote to Wayne, and I wrote him cold. I got his address from his publisher. And I pointed out to him that we had come the same direction. We'd come from Christian contemplative experience, then we'd added on the Hinduism, then we'd added on the Buddhism, then we added on the Sufism, added on the indigenous, and on and on and on. And also that I was a scientist, and that I knew in the Mystic Heart there were these large sections that were devoted to ecology and Thomas Berry's work and the relationship to nature and the love of nature. And that must let her, and I actually told him, I said, I could see myself dedicating my life to the message that's in your book. So he wrote me back. I actually still have the letter. And we actually met then in New York City within a couple, 3 months. And one of those things, remember from college where you'd sit up and talk all night with somebody? Yeah, so he and I talked all night in a hotel room and really realized that there was something there that wanted to be done. And then that grew because as we met other people in his circles, to make long story real short, they would say to Wayne, look, Wayne, you're many, many things, but you're not an organizer and you need an organizer. And Kurt's an organizer. And, that's turned out to be kind of lending all of those organizational skills to, building all these organizations and networks and websites and all of this other stuff that's, trumpeted this message ever since. That was 2001. So ever since 2001. And then, of course, Wayne passed in 2004. And we had started doing things together like the Parliament of World Religions in 2004. And I'll just add one more thing to that is that he was very close to Ken Wilber, and I've become very close to Ken Wilber. And it's so important because that underpinning of how all the mechanics of evolution and all these other things are part of this underpinning of sociology and spirituality. He really understood that. And of course, I've introduced David to Ken Wilber. They've done a number of programs together. Actually, Ken just wrote the introduction to our recent book from my publishing house, where he adds a new opening up, which is all about opening up to all these new possibilities. So last point, then, it was a total natural step for me to go from those connections to then the pro-social connection and maintain all of those relationships. And I will say, one of the most exciting afternoons I've ever had was listening to David Sloan Wilson and Ken Wilber talk all afternoon.
I remember that one very well. I still have the recording. Kate, as co-founder of Pro-Social Spirituality, you and Diane have taken, many months to develop the Pro-Social Spirituality curriculum. And I wanted to see if you could describe, one is what you see as the importance of pro-social spirituality, and a little bit about the Templeton Religious Trust Research Initiative.
Sure, absolutely. Well, it has been an amazing adventure working on this curriculum with Diane. I just have to say, for me, it has been like an apprenticeship with a master teacher. I am so amazed at how this curriculum is designed not only to inform, but to inspire and transform in real time. It's a curriculum that is experiential and interactive, and it's really the manifestation of an idea that emerged simultaneously and separately but not with communication between yourself, Jeff Janung, and our who introduced us here, Kurt Johnson, at the same time, without speaking with one another, had the idea that the 9 elements of a universal spirituality drawn from Wayne Teasdale's work in The Mystic Heart, and the 8 core design principles drawn from Eleanor Ostrom's work that David Sloan Wilson just shared with us a bit on, would be a very interesting hybrid approach to offering people the opportunity to go deep and wide, to explore the horizontal dimension of social cohesion. How can we as human beings come together most effectively and most harmoniously and thrive? And then realizing how difficult change can be, knowing that the vertical dimension of inner transformation is crucial. So these 9 elements of universal spirituality are that vertical dimension where we take the time to really cultivate attributes that help us live out the goals of pro-social. So it's fascinating to bring them together. We have this 8-week program that begins with a deep immersion, an orientation that's 3 hours long. Everything's on Zoom. It's all a virtual gathering. Then we have 6 weeks of going a little deeper on each of the 9 elements and each of the core design principles. And then we close, our final session is another 3-hour, very interactive, very open conversation where we really explore in personal terms how these 9 elements and 8 core design principles, plus several really amazing tools that come from pro-social, how these are helping our groups thrive or where we need to grow. Meanwhile, this is part of a Templeton Religion Trust sponsored research initiative. So wonderful scientists, social scientists are observing what's happening in these trainings and studying the impact of this work on group flourishing. So Ian McDonald and Paul Atkins are accredited researchers that are actually, we're going to come away from this really able to qualitatively study and measure the actual impact of incorporating these ideas that have truly been discovered in nature. Wayne Teasdale studying the interspiritual movement and the many functions of the many worlds religions, and David Sloan Wilson's work with Eleanor Ostrom looking at how groups manage to thrive, and even more exciting, David pushing the envelope a little further, saying, okay, how can we harness this? How can we actually incorporate this in ways that will help us guide and steer our cultural evolution? So that's the short version, believe it or not. There's more to be told, but it's very, very exciting.
Thanks. You might remember years ago, there was a television commercial, and it was a guy that was eating a candy bar and he wasn't paying attention. There was a lady that was eating some peanut butter, and they bumped into each other and said, well, this is how the Reese's cup was formed. And so here we've got these two streams, these two great rich traditions that are coming together that this training is built upon. So David, I wanted to turn to you here to have you tell us a little bit about the pro-social ARC training, these 8 core design principles, and then maybe one example of a case study of something where this has proven to be incredibly impactful.
Sure. And so the idea that these great ideas, which are so philosophically and spiritually powerful, could actually be turned into a coaching method is something that we've been working on for well over 10 years now. And it includes 2 components, always has, even before the spirituality part came in. One has to do with cooperation, and that's what Lynn's core design principles come in. But the other has to do with flexibility and adaptability. Because even if we have aspirations, even if we want to change, for example, by incorporating the core design principles, it's hard to do what we aspire to do. How many of your New Year's resolutions have you kept? How many strategic plans are actually fulfilled? And so to be actually adaptable and flexible is another important skill. And so we've combined those 2 skills in our practical training. This is all before adding the 9 elements of universal spirituality. And we're now applying it all over the world. I'll give you one of the earliest examples, which was a school for at-risk youth. So these were 8th and 9th graders that had flunked their courses and were almost certainly going to drop out if nothing were done. We created a school in which we now implemented the core design principles as best we could. We provided a safe social environment for them to become pro-social. And do you know, despite a lifetime of hardship, they responded within weeks. This is another point. And this is so often we think that training and improvement must take a long time if it happens at all. But no, part of this is that if you change the social environment and if you change basically your inner life and your outer life, this is something which you could begin to realize the benefits of almost immediately. And to reinforce what Kate said about the science part of this and the assessment part of this, in that study, we were good little boys and girls. We did a randomized control trial. The students that entered the school were a random sample of there was a comparison group that experienced the normal high school routine. And the fact that we could say that with such authority that this school worked, of course, adds to the impact. We know it worked because of the fact that we did a good job as scientists. And so I think that's the kind of standard that we're seeking with pro-social spirituality as we build in this more explicitly spiritual component. You know, if it works, we'll know it. And if it doesn't work, we'll know it too. So that's what learning and experimentation and evolution, and then we'll change it and we'll improve it. What would that be but a mindful, stewarded process of cultural evolution, done with, not done to? That's another important point. We're not like scientists, you know, working with subjects like lab mice. No, not at all. This is co-created, and so on and so forth. And if I might, I'd like to make one other point. I hope I'm not claiming up too much of the time, which is that we've learned to deliver pro-social sometimes in tiny doses, realizing that everyone is busy. And so it might be a 2-hour training or something like this. But pro-social spirituality is the opposite of that. Pro-social spirituality is actually quite demanding. It is, how many? Was it a 8-week course? Is that right, Kate? And the point that I want to make about that for anyone who's thinking, oh, I couldn't do that, is the strongest religions and the strongest meaning systems of all sorts, they demand a lot and they give a lot. Look at the strongest religions, how much they demand. There's tithing, there's meeting, you know, during the week in addition to Sundays. They demand so much and they give so much more in return that once you understand that, then you're more than willing to make the investment. And I think that what we're doing here, we'll probably develop both forms of pro-social spirituality, a short kind of teaser form that brings people in. But for the most part, we've created the long form. And yes, it's demanding, but yes, you're probably going to get much more in return. And those that have done it beforehand or some of the prototypes, that's another demonstration, basically, that this renews you, basically. This fills your cup. It doesn't drain it. That's what we aim to do. And that's what a really strong meaning system is, religious or otherwise. And that's what we're trying to do. It's very ambitious, but and it does demand a lot. So that means that, you know, like the Marines say, we need a few good men. So we need a few good groups in order to do this, and we have them. And so the experiment is basically about to begin, and so that's very exciting.
Solid points, really, and thank you for sharing them. You know, Diane, I want to turn to you for a minute and see if you could say some things about these 9 elements of universal spirituality.
Sure. One of the things that you notice if you meet or encounter mature practitioners across religions, across spiritual traditions, is that despite great differences in culture, in theology, in belief systems, there are qualities about them as people that are recognizable across all of those differences. And I believe that the 9 elements point to those things that mature that people who have cultivated a mature spirituality all have in common. Sort of like the groups that Eleanor Ostrom studied, that they all had the characteristics of these design principles, regardless of how remarkably different they were from each other. The same is true of these 9 elements. They are recognizable as spiritual maturity across cultural and religious differences. When David was talking earlier about how many of our aspirations we don't fulfill, like New Year's resolutions, in my experience, many of those kinds of resolutions don't tap into deep enough aspirations to motivate us to do the hard work involved in change. The 9 elements point to very deep and very profound aspirations of the soul and of the spirit. They include things like fully cultivating and actualizing living an ethical life, living in solidarity with all living beings, cultivating deep nonviolence, developing genuine humility, engaging in regular daily spiritual practice, developing mature self-knowledge, including working with all of our shadow material that we tend to project out onto the world and get into conflict with, being able to reintegrate all of that psychological material into our own being. Living a life of simplicity, both in terms of not wasting precious resources, but also learning how to make what is truly important the center of our daily living. Selfless service, living in the world with compassion and care. And finally, empowering and embodying the prophetic voice that works for justice and structural transformation at a local level, a national level, a world level. So these are things I think that call to the deepest part of us, and that as we cultivate them, part of what we gain is an ability to live with a genuine sense of self-respect and a genuine sense of dignity that changes the entire quality of a person's life.
Beautiful. Thank you. Kurt, Kate, you know, the pro-social spirituality, the first phase of this initiative is a research initiative. What are some of the research questions, some of the things that we're exploring that will ultimately be published?
I wonder if I could back up just a tiny bit, because this is the first, really, in so many ways, the maiden voyage of pro-social spirituality. But there was a prototype that you and I worked on together that is part of our Wednesday night small group of spiritual seekers that come together. And about, I don't know when it was, 2020, a couple of years ago, we started. We tried this on for size and started asking these questions. You know, how do we change? That's really the initial question. When we talk about pro-social spirituality, we say we're changing the way we change, because it is so difficult. Everybody wants to be transformed, but nobody wants to change. I stole that from you, David. But going back to this small group that Jeff and I meet with on Wednesday nights virtually. We're 2 years into this experiment and it's still going. We went through the 8-week process, and it had bumps in the road. We were all differences of opinion, differences of openness and willingness, but But what we came out with was ongoing engagement, that we said, okay, we're going to keep doing this, and we're continuing to explore this. That's the idea behind pro-social spirituality, that after that wide open session that closes the training, people are invited into ongoing engagement to continue to explore this. It doesn't happen with a wave of a wand, you know, it's an ongoing exploration. So the basic questions are, you know, are pretty straightforward, looking at how our groups either do well with or don't do well with these 9 elements and core design principles, to be sort of reflective, to engage in spiritual practice that allows us to really objectively look at our groups. How are we functioning? And, you know, what works easily for us? What is less easy for us? And by observing this, not only during the Zoom sessions, but also throughout the time in between sessions, where we're asking our practitioners to be reflective, to think about how this is working, how it's not working. So that's where we'll have some surveys that go out in between sessions, where we can just gather this data very simply. But more than just gathering data, it's an opportunity to pause and reflect and ask, how are we doing? How could we be doing better? I think I'm stealing this one from you, Kurt, the wonderful way Buckminster Fuller talked about change. You know, he says you can't change anything by fighting the existing reality. You know, what you do is you build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. And so together in this program, we're creating frameworks that really fit for any type of group, because it's not specific, it's not prescriptive, it's simply the framework. So the questions really revolve around that. They revolve around asking, you know, what do we need in order to really actualize these ideals we've set for ourselves?
Thank you. Well, we've got a few minutes left, and in our final time together, I'd like to ask the same question for each person, and that is, what are your hopes? What are your aspirations for pro-social spirituality? And we'll begin with you, Kurt.
Well, you know, I see a possibility in pro-social spirituality that I've never seen anywhere else before, because it's the beginning of bringing together the entire landscape that's going to have to come together in all of our skill sets, from all the external knowledge of science and the internal knowledge from the spiritual traditions, into how we actually move and become a cosmopolitan species on one planet, where our behavior is a welcoming behavior, and a behavior that expresses all those ideals that Diane talked about. And we're going to have to do that. We're going to have to do it all. And I remember a gathering we had shortly after Wayne passed at Omega Institute, with people talking about this, and we were talking and talking. And Llewellyn Vaughan-Lee, who you know as the great Sufi leader and Jungian psychologist and founder of spiritual ecology, he was kind of boiling, and he jumped up and he simply yelled, "It's not enough!" And I have always remembered that, because he realized we're going to have to bring together all of these different aspects that can move the world in the direction we're talking about. And that's why I think not only does David and his crew have these ideas, but David's a zealot. What I really admire about David, he is a zealot. And I mean that in the best way. He wants to see it really happen. And the last thing I'll say, in the letter that I took from Father Keating to His Holiness the Dalai Lama, when David and I were there, the letter's never been made public, but I've let one sentence out, and that was where Father Keating said, when talking about all these things, we have to find a way to make this actually happen. And it was all in bold. So that's what I would just share at this last round.
Thanks. Over to you, Diane. What are your hopes and aspirations?
I think that learning to work with each other cooperatively as collectives is one of the great imperatives of our time. And so I'm so delighted to learn about the core design principles, which I think give people very, very practical ways to learn how to work together effectively, cooperatively, for the well-being of the whole. I also think we need to, and part of the real function of spirituality is to help us grow into the kind of human beings who naturally tend to operate cooperatively, because we recognize how intimately our well-being is tied up with one another. So I see pro-social spirituality as bringing together those two possibilities. How do we operate together as we grow into people who almost will have no choice but to operate cooperatively and lovingly together?
Thank you. David, you're a hopeful guy. What are your hopes and aspirations here?
I'm a zealot, it seems. So, I want to begin by reinforcing something that Kate said, which is that we do not have in mind an in and out training. We have in mind continuous engagement. We want you for life. And I think that a big difference between inner spirituality in most of its forms, including my good friend Ken Wilber, and other major figures such as Teilhard de Chardin, it's also macro. It's also macro that in some sense we have this idea of conscious evolution. There's the evolutionary leaders, more than 100 of them, all in the service of conscious evolution. But what's on offer here when we bring in the so-called hard science of evolution, which has been just transformed over my lifetime, is a much greater clarity in what conscious evolution means. It's almost as if we had fuzzy vision and then we put on a pair of glasses that gave us much sharper vision. That if we're going to consciously steward cultural evolution, our own evolution, then we must form targets of selection. We must orient variation around that target. We must replicate best practices with context sensitivity in mind. We must do this at all scales, starting at the scale of the small groups, then working up to the meso scale. The degree of resolution is just, and clear-sightedness is just amazing. And the essential role of spirituality, is for many people is in the opposite corner as science, right? But to actually bring those two together and to think that this could be fully spiritual and fully scientific is just amazing. And so this is, and I'll end with the concept of catalysis, the idea that rates of reaction, rates of change, like chemical change, can be vastly accelerated, catalyzed, if you know what to do. And this is also true for cultural change, that actually not only is positive change possible, but it can be very rapid. And that's what we're trying to do. So I think that is the promise that I see in pro-social, with pro-social spirituality really providing that vertical dimension. So that's the potential that I see in what we're doing.
Thanks. So Kate, you've got the final word here, and in terms of your hopes and aspirations, but also in terms of how people could get more information, groups that might be interested in this, before we hand it back to Kurt.
Well, it's pretty amazing that the interspiritual age and the digital age coincide. You know, we all see that. We can see them as really fractals of this larger transformation that we're a part of. This is a small part of something even larger. So my my hopes are that these many networks that have emerged over the 20 or so years since the term interspirituality was coined, that we would be able to nourish those networks of people, of these small circles of people worldwide, working for good, to help them develop and cultivate tools that will help them. For example, it's amazing to see who's attracted to pro-social spirituality. We're just beginning to unveil this program, and we're talking with people who are working with thousands of incarcerated and formerly incarcerated people. Young people are interested. The cooperation circles of the United Religions Initiative all around the world. It's amazing to see the work of elders like Lynn Ostrom and Wayne Teasdale being passed through us to the next generation. And to me, that's crucial. If it's not interesting to the next generation, it's really not interesting to me. So it's fascinating to see it take root in that way. Probably the best way to get involved right now is to talk with your groups. If you're part of a group, right now we're gathering groups of around 10 people to go through this training as part of the Templeton Religion Trust Research Initiative. But if your group isn't 10 people, we're pulling together cohorts that may be anywhere from 3 to 10 people that will cluster together and go through the training together. This is being offered right now without tuition as part of the Templeton Research Initiative in exchange for the participants' willingness to be part of the research, willingness to log some of their reflections and to have the recordings of our times together observed by the researchers. But I think that's what I'm thinking of right now. But beyond this is to really envision a world that is works for all. That's the idea of pro-social. And by inserting the interspiritual principles of Wayne Teasdale, I think what I see is just jumpstarting that, making that happen, giving people the depth they need to live out their aspirations.
Thank you. And also, for those that are interested, you can get some information on the training at prosocialspirituality.org. And also, we're going to be working toward an offering through Humanities Team as well. So you'll receive more information about that in the future. Back to you, Kurt.
Well, thank you so much for this amazing presentation on pro-social spirituality, joining spirituality, science, and activism. And a big thanks to our presenters, Jeff Janung, David Sloan Wilson, Diane Burke, and Kate Sheehan Roach. And a thanks also to our tech wizard, Garth Catterall from Humanities Team. And thanks to all of you who have joined this program. We hope it can be a part of the transformative awakening that is going on all around the world in our time. And we thank you for bringing your voices to that. So love from all of us, and be safe and be well.
Hello, I'm Reverend Marla Regal, founder of the Inspired Business Center, a spiritual business consultancy headed here in Houston, Texas. My passion is to bring joy, meaning, and purpose back to the workplace. And I do this by inspiring everyone in the organization to realize their divine nature, limitless potential, and unique calling. It's my honor to be hosting this panel on the social, spiritual, and economic impact of conscious enterprise. I invited this amazing panel because I know them, I know their heart, I know their work, and they are going to be absolutely phenomenal in this conversation. We're all seasoned global entrepreneurs, and we've turned our passion and purpose into a meaningful, conscious enterprise. So we're going to be talking about what that means, what it takes, the good, the bad, and the ugly of doing something that's probably new in your market or in your part of the world, and all of the benefits of doing that. And I think each person engaging with us today is going to get a sense that they are part of all of this, and they can be part of all of this right where they are. So as I introduce this panel, first is Mark Eckhart. Mark is joining us from Denmark today. He's forever curious about the interconnection of culture, neuroscience, and business. As such, he's the co-founder and CEO of Common, which is a creative accelerator and community for socially responsible businesses, products, projects, and ideas. And Drew and Paul and I also have the honor of being part of that organization, and that's how we've known each other for several years, and how I know their hearts and why they're on this panel today. Mark is also creator and founder of 1 Million Truths, a media platform dedicated to racial truth and reconciliation and real-time testament to the scale of endemic bias and racism in the fabric of American daily life. He built Common to 22 countries, 28 industries, spanning traded corporations, early stage ventures, and solo entrepreneurs, validating an idea. Currently, he supports and advises over 300 businesses globally. And I can tell you, when he's talking with you, you're the only one in the room. So it's amazing that he can keep 300 different enterprises and people going all on his head. These leaders have created and managed over 68 billion in organizational value through new approaches to leadership and systems for operating responsibly in complex market conditions. His clients include high-level executives, renowned creative professionals, thought leaders, politicians, startups, large corporations, and 2020 presidential candidates. Brands include Google, Fox, Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, Climate Reality Project, Nature Conservancy, and Rebecca Henderson. His work has been featured in Forbes, Fast Company, Time, Medium, Sustainable Brands, Communication Arts Incorporated, Mag, and more. He's a Toyo recipient, which places him amongst the top leaders in America, including former recipients President Bill Clinton, Gerald Ford, John F. Kennedy, and Vice President Al Gore. He is an ordained Buddhist priest, former professional musician, and he and his wife Melina and 2 daughters live in Denmark. Our next guest is Drew Weaver. He joins us from Los Angeles, California. He's a social entrepreneur with over 20 years of experience in the entertainment industry as a broadcast engineer, writer, and producer. Thus, all the fancy mics and headgear. He knows what he's doing. His passion for problem solving and love for creative ideas miraculously aligned in 2020 to give him Life to Black Dollar Fund, a business designed to bridge the wealth gap for Black communities. And I remember when he first shared on a call with all of us that only 1% of Black businesses get venture capital funding. Drew is committed to changing that. While developing Black Dollar Fund, Drew began researching Black history to learn about brilliant Black people who have made significant and extraordinary contributions to the world. This led him to starting a TikTok account titled Black Brilliance on the B-Side, in ways to share his findings. In weeks, his account grew by the thousands, and now his audience is over 55,000, and it's growing about 1,000 new subscriptions a week. He's a TikTok partner and recently was asked to join their Black TikTok community program to promote his educational platform. He believes that his lifelong passion has led him to his purpose, which is to solve the biggest issue his people have ever faced outside of freedom. That's economic justice. And our third panelist, Paul Giotto, lives in Boulder. He's a transmitted Zen teacher and co-founder of several tech startups, including his newest venture, providing mindfulness-backed practices and support for purpose-driven enterprises and home caregivers. He's the founder and head teacher at the Eon Zen Sangha in Boulder and offers executive and team coaching through his Zen at Work consultancy. His teachings present the importance of raising consciousness together in presence and purpose. Paul taught Zen at Naropa University, is on the board of directors of the Willow Farm Contemplative Caregiving Center, and leads the mindfulness program at the Red Mountain, Colorado Residential Treatment Center for Teens. Welcome, panel. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
So to open the conversation, I'd like each of you to weigh in on what it means to be a conscious enterprise. Paul, would you start saying what it's meant for you?
Yeah, I think being a conscious enterprise is not so much about what you do as what you are. And that means being conscious. That's what I think is the most important thing about being a conscious enterprise. So there's a notion that we can do certain things that signal that we're conscious, developing a wellness program, a diversity program, something like that. And we think that that is what it means to be conscious. But really being conscious means being conscious. And being conscious it takes work. It takes work. It takes sacrifice. It takes commitment. And it takes a willingness to reach out to others who are also equally committed to being conscious in their business. And it's difficult to do this in an economic climate, which is pretty unconscious. So I think that's something that's really valuable to recognize right from the start, is that those of us who do aspire to be conscious in business are working in a culture and in an economic system, this form of capitalism that we have, that is very unconscious and has perverse incentives and externalized costs and all of these things. So to be conscious of all these things is the primary matter at hand, really being conscious of everything, the impact you have on the world, the people you work with, what their values are, what your values are, and this whole big picture. So I'll leave my definition at that.
Thanks. Drew, what would you add to that?
I have to admit, when I heard the term, I had all these different ideas of what it meant. So I had to look it up. So I'm going to read what my definition of it is and then my response. It's a business that does no harm, has a holistic awareness of impact of its actions, continues to strive to do better, and addresses at least one social or environmental problem through its business model or operations. So once I understood that, I started to realize that my business was that. I mean, I just do things just from my heart, knowing that others have had less in life, less opportunities in life. I couldn't look at life through my own goggles all the time because of the advantages that I've had. I had to look back on friends, family, people that I walk and see on the street and talk to. So I had to be conscious about others and not just be in my own bubble. So I didn't realize I was doing, conscious enterprise. I just realized that it was all about just being a good person, being a person who focuses on other people and not yourself. So when my business was developed, it was all during the era of when George Floyd and the whole world was in an uproar and marching, and a beautiful thing where everybody, it seemed, was in the streets and, not only risking, time and all stuff like that, but their lives, because we had a pandemic. So in that process, I realized that, the youth, even different ages, but the youth was out there marching, and I figured that the old heads like myself had to do something economically and work them together. If you look back in history, you would know that Martin Luther King was working on economics when he was assassinated. He had already worked on civil rights. But if you work on both of them at the exact same time, then we can be able to have some kind of, I think, everlasting change instead of it just being one or the other. I think they need to be worked at the same time. So that's what I think was a conscious enterprise, and realizing that I am a part of that and one of the leaders in it, that you can be able to address social or environmental problems and actually incorporate it in your business process, your business model. And that's what it's about for me.
Thanks, Drew. Mark, what are your thoughts?
Three of you are going to accuse me of being lazy here, but I don't know if I can add much to what Drew and Paul have already shared. I think they covered the concept or the definition or whatever this thing is pretty thoroughly. So I guess the only thing I feel like I can add that might be interesting of a value to what Paul and Drew already said is that I think conscious business is a reflection of an impulse that one has deep within themselves that they then commit to understand and pursue. It's an impulse that guides them, that is grounded in goodness. And I think kind of the fundamentals of who we are as humanity. I believe that people fundamentally care about each other and care about the world around them. And conscious business is kind of an acknowledgement and honoring of that.
Mark, I know that you're involved in, as we said, lots of different industries and countries. What are you seeing around the world in terms of conscious business? How is that showing up around the world?
Well, there's certainly a surge. There's more people who are familiar with, I'm going to call it the commitment to being a conscious business. I think, though, we're entering or have already entered a new phase. So at Common, we kind of refer to the first phase as being the Patagonias and the Ben and Jerry's of the world. So businesses that were born out of just a lifestyle and a very personal relationship with the earth and in the world. Phase two was the Tom Shoes of the world. So folks may recall the buy one, give one model. It was really rooted in charity. Phase three was the introduction of B Labs and measurement and metrics and in trying to account and register for the impact of one's operations and operational footprint. Now, I don't even have the words fully clear in my mind, but what I can speak to is that we are absolutely in a novel point in time in human existence and history. We are operating at the edge of planetary boundaries. The fragility of our supply chains has been fully exposed from COVID and the pandemic, and then there's the effects of exponential tech. And so I think conscious business and entrepreneurship at this stage has to acknowledge that and has to study that and has to come to a certain level of understanding of those dynamics for the purpose of making really good decisions strategically in planning and design wise. And I know when we were preparing to do this, I just kind of threw out the question, I think it was with you three, that I'm kind of wondering if the world needs a new bottle of whiskey or, a new version of hot dogs. And what I'm pointing at there is, are those kinds of businesses, even if they are super, super conscious, are they addressing the things that humanity needs right now? And I think if we can boil it down to two things, is that we need to be better in our design and understanding of the kind of second and third order implications of the things that we design. And we need solutions and models that allow us to kind of upgrade our ability for collective action, knowing that we, through this whole system that got created after post-world, the Second World War, knowing that system has generated some very, very large challenges that are affecting all of us now and will continue to affect us in growing ways moving forward.
So I think you're talking about some of the realities of engaging in this type of enterprise. I'd like Drew's thoughts on how you've seen this and what you've created, and how you're seeing this through the growth of your TikTok audience, for example.
How am I seeing conscious? What do you mean? What am I seeing?
What are in terms of what does it take? What are the realities of engaging in a conscious enterprise? As Mark was alluding to, how do you make it real? How do you keep it alive? How do you keep it going? You seem to have found some of that in your in your work
Yeah.
with your TikTok?
Okay. Yeah. It's a hard thing to get people to understand doing good can do better than the way we're doing things now.
Yeah.
You run into a lot of, especially with my business, if it's all about being able to build the economic injustices that have happened over hundreds of years, being able to tell people that I have a system that can be able to adjust that and bring the disparity down and hopefully eradicate it. But that type of thing is too big for people to understand. But the idea of doing good without greed is something that a lot of people can't comprehend. The things that I run into being a conscious business is that people always want to know what's the catch. What's your purpose? Why do you want to do this? And when I tell them, sometimes it's too holistic for them. It's too holistic. They're like, what? You're doing it for the good, just for the good? You want to make a lot of money. You want to do this, you want to do that. And I'm like, no, I want to make other people rich. I want to make other people have opportunities. I want to see people move from being homeless to having a home, from having a home to having, 2 houses or a beach house, or from having that, being able to start a business and leaving some kind of generational wealth for their families. And it's something that a lot of people can't comprehend. They'll call it everything under the sun. They'll call it a scam. They'll call it and you have to stick to your guns and say, no, come with me and listen to what I'm talking about. And I'll show you. You have to be, with doing great things, you have to be so transparent. You have to show every process so that you can let them know the proof is in the pudding. Come walk with me and I'll tell you how it works. And when I do that, that's what breaks the barrier. When they finally get to understand where I'm coming from. And it's still the same traditional sales type model in a sense, which means you have to get people to know you, to like you, to trust you, and then move forward into either buying into whatever you're trying to do. And I just go in and just tell them exactly the truth, any issues they may have. And I always welcome criticism so that you can be able to adjust. You're never, no one's perfect. You want to be able to make the best system as possible. That's why you bring people in and you talk about, what's going on. But one of the biggest issues is trying to gain people's trust that you're trying to do good by others, because of our society has been built so much on greed that a person would smile in your face and this is song all the while they want to take your place type of thing. That has bred so much in America that it's more like the thing to do, and it's odd to do things the opposite way. So we're like weird people who want to do stuff for the good and help everybody else, and average people are the ones who want to just take and change and don't care about things. So it's a struggle, but the thing is that when you find your purpose, those things fall to the wayside because you know where you need to go. You know your direction. And if someone doubts you, just say, just watch me. You'll come on at some point. At some point you'll understand. But those who are already there, already get it. And then as you start to grow, you start to realize that other people are starting to realize it's real. It's a real thing. It's not a gimmick. So yeah, that's why I learned in this process, in this journey of telling people we all can get along, we all can do things, and we can all succeed without having to take other people down. It's not a competition that way. It's more of a unity thing. It's more oneness. The thing is that we're already, and I know we can do it because the way capitalism works now is a oneness. It's just a oneness in the wrong direction. If we came together trying to do great, we can take that oneness toward the other direction. And it's not a capitalism, socialism. I think we can make capitalism work if we extract the greed and focus on the need. We all can get along and become the wealth that we desire. One of the biggest issues that I think people don't understand if they do the studies, that not everybody wants to be wealthy to the point of $1 billion or something like that. Some people can just love life at $100,000 a year. And so that greed and all that stuff like that, how much money I can possibly get over anybody else, that doesn't build oneness. That builds like a certain a negative aspect of life that I want to kind of like show people by proof in the pudding that by doing well, you can become wealthier. than the way capitalism works now.
Thanks, Drew. That's a beautiful example. And I think people engaging with us today can really get a sense of what it takes and how that patience and really the love that you're extending to people who are engaging with you pays off in the long run when they begin to understand the concept from actually watching you do it. So Paul, let me ask you, in your world and bringing Zen into the corporate world, what have you found?
Yeah, first off, I want to just appreciate Drew. Drew, I've known you for about 1.5 years, and you are the single most inspiring individual I've met in all of that time. And I'll say to everybody watching this panel, if you want to be the leader of a conscious business, tap in to the spirit that Drew puts out with every breath he makes. That's where it's at. You know, Mark talked about this paradigm shift that we're going through, and it's you know, it's very profound and it's very real, and there's promise and peril in paradigm shifts. And I think Drew is right on board with the paradigm shift, well advanced in that paradigm shift, and he spoke a little bit to kind of the perils and the challenges of people who don't quite get it because they're further along on that shift in their own consciousness. And doubtless there's many people like that, particularly older people. But there's also a lot of people that are tapped into it. And, you know, Drew's 55,000 followers belong there, and the employees and leaders of the 300 odd companies in common, you know, are part of this and really tapped into this. And I'm seeing that as I look into bringing mindfulness, really deeply informed mindfulness practices, purpose-based, care-based practices into the workplace, is I see that there's a lot of mostly younger people who are working for companies, young, small and large, who really care about the purpose of the organizations. These are people that maybe 20 years ago would have gone to work for nonprofits because that's about mission, and then everything else is about profit, you know, financial profit. But it's not like that anymore. Everybody is looking for purpose, for social purpose, particularly younger people. And it runs all the way through. So there really is more and more nowhere to hide in terms of pretending that a company has a deep purpose, has a deep connection, cares about their supply chains, cares about their community. The virtue signaling doesn't work anymore. And it's coming from the younger people who are making choices about where they're going to work and what they're going to create in the world. So while there is still an older layer, because paradigm shifts go in kind of well understood stages, and one of the most important ladder stages is that the old people die off. So to a certain extent, it just takes time. But while a certain age group, cohort, you know, as well as a racial and a you know, gender-based cohort, you know, hold on to power, they'll probably continue to hold on to power. But more and more that power will be taken over by people who do have this consciousness. And then it's not for those who are tuned in to this kind of spirit, it's not like a research project. You know, let's go and do an analysis and figure all this stuff out and throw, you know, $100,000 at some sort of analysis. No, you just really look at your impact and listen to your customers, and you listen to your constituency and your partners and your supply chain, right? You look, if you really open your eyes and see and listen, then this isn't necessarily hard. It's the inner commitment to follow through on it that we can all support each other with, and support is needed.
Thank you. Mark, you have said before that there's probably no other choice right now for the planet than for businesses and enterprises to become more conscious. Would you speak more about that?
Yeah, let me see if I can't do this quickly. Whether it's destruction of biodiversity, the climate crisis, or climate change, win-lose dynamics, perverse incentive, rival-west dynamics, exponential tech like CRISPR, drone technology, or the damage done to the information commons or the epistemic commons, which is the body of knowledge that we use to come to agreement on to turn left or right as a society, or the processes by which we use to arrive at those conclusions. All of those things that I've listed are in great disrepair, to be quite honest, and we're just at our limits, and so we have been operating business via a linear materials economy. You know, we extract, we make things, we sell them for really cheap, and then we do that over and over and over again. I mean, we just don't have the room, the bandwidth to do that anymore. And so circular economies, regenerative economies, all those kinds of practices that are coming into the fold are required. And so I guess I'll be kind of like the bad cop here. Like I really am at a point where, like, if you're not building conscious business, please don't build a business. Just go do something else. Please, on behalf of myself and my children and all of you, go do something else. You just don't need it. And it's not going to be helpful. In spite of the justifications, the rationalizations about employing people and all that kind of stuff and helping local economy, it's how you're helping and what you're contributing or not to those things. That's really the question here. And if you're not committed to contributing what's needed, please don't contribute anything as an entrepreneur.
Thanks, Mark. I think that says it.
People are going to, okay.
So one of the themes of this Global Oneness Week is that oneness, and how social enterprise, conscious enterprise can connect us. Each individual who is either engaging by doing business with a conscious enterprise, leading a conscious enterprise, all 55,000 of the people that listen to Drew every week. So I'd like anyone on the panel to comment on how we can connect with the individual oneness and humanity of each person on the planet through our conscious enterprise.
Paul, I think you should go first on this one.
I think you want me to speak some Dharma there, Mark. So I'll just go ahead and say, fundamentally, oneness is the nature of reality, right? The interdependence we speak about in the Buddhist tradition. It's our Dharma. We're all interdependent. So that's reality. So we are already fundamentally connected. And again, kind of like I've been saying, we open our eyes to reality. We open our eyes to how we're impacting others. And then that itself is the precondition for a more lively and kind of, material connection with other people. So I think we do just that. We just listen. We listen closely. We pay attention to everyone that is in our business and that our business is impacted by. So it's so easy to think we need to figure things out and have a plan and think we know what people want or what their own intentions are. And then we build these business models around that. And sometimes a problem is solved by reaching out and talking to a customer or a client or a partner and actually connecting on a real human level with people. And that means customers too, right? Reaching out and just maintaining that human connection. And so that sounds maybe obvious, but it isn't always obvious. When we get into a business mode, we turn people into, something else, functions, or they're outside of our awareness as human beings. But to always hold them as human beings and to listen and pay attention, I would say, are the the preconditions for that. And I know Mark and Drew are going to have even some more probably practical, I think, things to say.
Drew, you want to go for it? I'll go after you.
Oh, sure. What I think about that is that, being able to change people it's hard. So I always say in that process, you got to meet people at what motivates them, So I think being able to have oneness has many prongs. So if, like, for right now, we have people who have oneness on the way capitalism works, so, on greed. So how do you replace that to be able to, or even meet them at that point? Like what I do focuses on meeting people even who are at the greed level and showing them that they can make more money by doing good than doing what they're constantly doing right now. So it's being able to get people to those who you probably can't change mentally to think about, saving the earth or, recycling and stuff like that. They just want to make money or whatever it may be. You show them that they're meeting them at their need. Their need is they're at the greed level. Then you show them that doing good is more profitable. That way we can try and get what we want done and be able to have the process actually work for the good instead of working for what it is now. Because you gotta understand. Well, for me, I started to realize is that a lot of people, this world is divided on the level of that, they don't even want to believe in global warming. And I realized it's like, well, if they're never going to believe in it, the reason why they don't believe in it, you focus on that. They don't believe in it because they're greedy. They want to be able to make money, no matter what. If I can sell this, no matter, if it's harming the earth, so be it. But if we somehow make that thing that they want so bad to make the money off of is a good thing, and that's by us doing what we do and showing them that it's more profitable, it's more beneficial to do the good than it is to do the other things. And I think that's where we can pivot away from just saying doing good all the time, because they're not going to get it. Those people aren't. We got the people that are in this lane right now, we get it. The other ones who have not, and it's been around forever, who haven't gotten it, they're not on this plane. So how do we get it is that once the world is competitive, once we start to move in strides better than them, faster than them, economically more sound than them by doing good, we solve our problem. We're not going to change them, but we solve our problem. What they're going to do is they're going to start doing good and making more money by doing so. But we want to save our particular earth, save our people. That's how we show. That's where I feel like we have to show them that what we do is better. And we, like I said, we're not going to be able to change them. We just got to meet them at what motivates them and be able to shift that narrative to be good. Everything we want to do is good, and all these different motivators as to do it, as to why they're going to do good, we can't change that. At least that's what I believe. We can't change all of them. But when they see doing good is better, I think that it might click for them. So that's my idea. I don't know for sure. That's what I'm betting on. And I'm gonna ride with that until it either works or it breaks. So that's all I got.
I'm on that train. I'm on that train. So I just want to check in, Marla, I just want to check in. So the question is, how do we get to that experience of oneness through conscious business?
Yes.
I mean, honestly, that's a hard question to answer. But I think Drew and Paul have spoken to it, kind of from a couple of different sides. I'll take the approach of intention/vision. Your vision is a doorway. Your vision for your business is a doorway into that experience of oneness. But you have to understand what vision is. A lot of people relate to vision as if it's a fixed point or a destination that you're going to get to, or you ought to, or want to get to. And the assumption there is once you arrive at that fixed place, that you will reap the rewards of doing so. That of course, we have goals and things that we want to check off the list, but vision as a destination or a fixed place tends to end up being the kind of experience that Paul spoke to. Like, we're just doing business stuff and it's kind of void of any meaning or richness. But vision as an experience that you can create and generate and amplify through your tools, your resources, your ingenuity, that is the doorway into that experience of oneness. And so, a world where people fearlessly pursue fairness and balance, that's Common's vision. That's all I'm focused on every day. Of course, we have systems and processes, and those are in there to help us get out of our own way from blocking the experience that we're committed to generating. And I'll just break it down to this. If you as an entrepreneur can get your head and your heart around the fact that if you just committed to creating experiences that reminded you that you loved yourself and you love the person to the left and to the right of you, you're going to experience oneness all the time. And it won't matter if you're doing and working on an Excel sheet, or if you're, cleaning the toilet in the office, or whatever it is, or running a campaign or closing a deal. Do that and you'll feel it and experience it directly.
Beautiful. Anyone want to add anything to that question before we move on? Very rich. Thank you. One other question I'd like to, and Drew touched on it, but I'd like us to expand a little further, is that idea that you're doing good work or you're making money. And Mark, I'll have you start on this because you work with so many different enterprises, but how are they making that balance of making it economically feasible, but doing work that they love and feel passionate about?
I wish conscious entrepreneurs would be more aggressive around money, to be honest. Really. I mean, why not? It makes sense. The work that we're doing is going back into our communities and into the world and generating more value. Now, I'm not referring to solely financial or monetary value. I'm talking about or referring to all 5 or 6 forms of value, putting things back into there. So there's money, of course, there's health and well-being, there's wisdom, there's culture, there's technology, and there's commodities. And so I want you, and in that model, money and finance is just 1/6, 1 out of 6 forms of value. So absolutely, we want you to generate as much of that as you can, because that will allow you to grow value in those other domains. Unfortunately, I think that the space inherited some of the baggage from the nonprofit industry. I'm just going to put it out there around money, and that ends up being a constraint and a limiting factor in how people relate to financial abundance. There's a lot of stuff around, well, if I make a lot of money, then I'm naturally a bad person. If I make a lot of money, I'm extracting from people and I'm exploiting people. And as a field, we need to get over that. We should support each other in generating as much as we can, because our values and our principles and our ethics are intact. And we actually have the systems and the ways in which we can catch ourselves, or we're reminded that we need to calibrate when we veer. I mean, none of us are perfect. It's a constant calibration and adjustment around morals and ethics. And if you're that fluid, then you should be going all out, wholeheartedly after generating financial abundance.
Drew, do you want to speak to that one?
Now, the idea of how good work can be economically viable. Is
Yes.
that what we were talking about? Okay. Yeah. I agree with Mark. I mean, I always look up to Mark when he speaks about things. It's just, it opens my eyes a lot to things that I'm just not aware of. Because when you have a business, you're so, whatever you're in your lane. You're like constantly working inside your lane. And when Mark speaks, he's talking from different businesses, like you mentioned before, 300 different businesses. That ability is just beyond me. So with me, I look at it as that my business is focused on proving that doing good is more economically viable than any other thing on the planet. As far as economics goes. I believe in doing good. My whole life, I've been thinking, like, how can I help, when I pass a homeless person, how can I help? Not just, give them 5 minutes, but how can I help them get off the street for good? And those things aren't possible just by one person doing it. But if we created a system in sense where everybody cared about each other, those types of things wouldn't exist in the plethora that it is. You would have people every day just stopping by, trying to get someone off the street or doing whatever. But we're all, trying to survive and do certain things. And so it's hard to get people to think that doing good is more economically viable than trying to rip somebody off, because that's just a quick route to it, they think, in the sense of like, oh, let me sell you something that's really only worth $5 for 500, but that's the quick way. And I don't mind capitalism in the sense, but I look at it as, how can we get a system that already works, which is capitalism, and be able to extract the greed from it. And that's where I came up with Black Dollar Fund. And it realizes that, proving to people that if I use capitalism and I take, the money that I make from it, and actually as a business, my sole purpose is to take that money out and reinvest it. I create an economic ecosystem that's constantly bringing in, like Mark was saying, a lot of money, a lot of money, but also going back out. So therefore, this cycle is continual. So therefore, people who need and want things in life can always come to us, this group, to be able to, especially when we meet you at your need, like you're like focused on trying to do good or start a business for your family. Why not? And especially for me, I'm doing it for Black people who've been left behind, who, historically haven't been able to get the loans. Like we talked before, less than 1% getting investments, walking into buildings and, not being able to get a job interview. I mean, those types of things where we have to offset. So when I talk about doing good for people, that's a part where I say I have to walk them along to say, hey, look, it's possible. It's just the fact, like we talk about here, you got to think of that oneness. You got to think of like, there is a way that we all can get what we desire. And it doesn't have to be, you got people who are like the 1% who desire just billions and billions in control. That's already happening. But for the rest of us, those things can happen. And being able to do that is possible just by creating a system that actually looks out for one another. And like I said before, most people can't see it because they've been stuck in this other oneness, this oneness of greed, that they're so focused on capitalism, the way it's already set, they don't realize they keep losing in this situation because they're not focusing on anybody else but themselves. It could win collectively, and I started to think this whole thing years ago when I was even a kid. It's like, if each person, put in so much money, they could be able to do certain things, but nope, they're focused on just themselves. And a oneness, is not a selfish oneness. It is a oneness that's inclusive. That means I am my brother's keeper. I am my sister's keeper. And therefore, when I walk around, I look at what I can be doing for others. And if it has to be, like for me, if it has to be me sacrificing everything I got to do so, then so be it. Because I don't really put that much value on money. I put it on the fact of we need to have it to survive. But I'd rather it be a situation where just the average person can go on a vacation when he or she wants to. And it doesn't have to be limited to just a staycation because you don't have enough funds. So we really want to kind of like be, aware of that. By doing good, I believe, is more economically viable than the other way around. We just haven't done it yet. And when I prove it, and this is what I believe, when I prove that it's viable and that it's better than what we already have, I believe the competitive nature in humanity will come over to our side because of the fact that they're going to see, wow, it really works. I thought he was kidding.
Can I jump on that real quick?
Absolutely.
Can I jump on that? So, first of all, Drew this is going to sound funny, but I really mean it in the most positive way. Drew has a PhD in greed, meaning he understands greed deeply and provides kind of escape routes out of greed. Paul reacted because greed, anger, and ignorance, very, very important part of Buddhist training and study. And as Drew speaks, he's just the master. He's got his PhD in that. but what Drew keeps talking about, look, you don't need to make $1 million. You know, success could be $100,000 that allows you to go on a vacation. And I can't tell you how many people who, upon hearing that as a possibility, they just go blank. It's like they can't process that as a possibility and something to aspire to, because we're so ingrained in, you're either a unicorn and you're going for $1 billion, you're going public and there's going to be a massive exit and you're going to exit and you're going to buy a big house and really fancy cars or whatever it is. But if all of us were like, hey, 100,000, 200,000, whatever it is that you need to leave a really quality life, cool. And why don't we just support millions of those businesses?
And Mark, I want to, what you just spoke about in support. So we've had this concept of oneness from the individual level, but I know that you lead a larger organization, that part of the value of that for those of us who share that, and the people that are in humanities team and so forth, talk about the value of coming together for these enterprises, for these causes, for these passions and purposes. What's the value of coming together as individual entrepreneurs or as individual companies to do this work?
Oh, I mean, there's so many different ways to talk about the value of being in community and relationship as an entrepreneur with other entrepreneurs and businesses. There's the isolation piece. You know, we can address that. There is the speed and efficiency piece. Knowing that there is a group of people that you can go to for information, you know, whatever it is, support, as opposed to having to reach out there in the world and find somebody and kind of qualify them and check to make sure their values align. That's a benefit. The ability to just get work done and just get help. You know, I need a deck done. I need somebody to proof this. You know, can somebody make an introduction over there? Recently, we had a member who, you know, the effects of the pandemic caught up with him and he needed some financial help. And within 3 minutes, we were able to provide that, generate and provide that. That's the value of a healthy, functional community, among other things. And I also think, again, going back to those dynamics that I referred to that are playing out, I really believe that we are going to be more and more dependent on each other to provide a person with a job, to help somebody relocate if they happen to have been living in an area of the planet that's no longer, you know, habitable because of the rise in ocean levels or whatever it is, or temperatures. Like, my vision for Common has always been that, you know, we can respond rapidly to anything that comes our way. And so for me, that's the whole intention of community. And I think that's the power, is that we are able to be responsive and take care of each other and minimize impact.
Thank you. Paul, what are your thoughts about how we come together as community?
Yeah, I'll certainly echo Mark's assertion of the value and the promise of doing that, and the necessity of doing it right now. You know, we have to. If we don't, we're doomed. So fortunately, it's the reality that we're all connected, and it is important. It's essential, really, to consciously come together in community, because the work that both Mark and Drew were talking about in terms of kind of reorienting our relationship to our value exchanges, okay, shifting out of just the single, you know, money-based exchange and that transactional kind of model, which is mostly what it's been based on, opening it up to the 6 domains of value, and then working, you know, with those. It takes a community that respects those other domains of value in order to be a participant in that type of economy. So it's essential. And then as it evolves and grows, it's wonderful. It's amazing. I mean, like Mark described, aid and sustenance and partnership emerge in places that they don't emerge in merely a financially transactionally based economy. Yeah. So it comes. But and this is one thing I think it's valuable to bring forth, is to be a participant in this paradigm shift as we all aspire to be, it does require us to find a community and to help others in community. And it requires both outer work and inner work. So there's the outer work of figuring things out and doing the partnerships and, doing the spreadsheet that you understand what your different value propositions are in different, areas. And then there's the inner work that is about your own relationship to your own abundance, your own lack, your own potential, your own stand and values.
Yeah.
And we can't forget that. You really can't do the outer work without doing the inner work.
Thanks, Paul.
Yeah.
Judy, do you want to bring it home with a couple minutes of your thoughts?
Oh, sure. Thank you. I appreciate, Paul as well as Mark, man. They always enlighten you. They've done the research on on oneness, being in the Buddha mentality, the things that they say together. It's like, it just kind of like brings you to a higher level of thinking. I appreciate you guys for that. When I think of community, I really think of, there's 5 letters in that mean the most. And that is UNITY. It's unity. That's what means the most in that word. And when we come together in a community, we focus on how can we make each other better? How can we be an asset, an ally? How can we help you get to another place? There's no jealousy. There's no envy. There's all love. It's family. It's respect, honor. Excuse me. When you look at community, you draw energy from it. With our group comment, I draw energy from it because I see other people doing well. And I look at that and I say, how can I interject and be able to help? Or how can I look at this and be able to learn? So it creates that adrenaline, that energy, rejuvenation. It's not like the middle child complex where I don't want to be, it's all about me. Nobody's paying attention to me, so I got to be an individual. So I got to go out of my way to be. It doesn't. It's like no matter what, everybody in that scenario is looking out for one another. And the thing is that sometimes people think if you get into a community, you all have to be the same. So therefore, they look at the individuality part of it is stricken. I don't want to, I don't have to be in that community because they always make you wear a bow tie. They always make you do this. They always make you do that. And it's like, no, in this situation, the community doesn't have to be, we don't have to be the exact same. The only thing that's the same is our hearts, where we want to do for people. That's the same. You can be, a punk rocker. You could be, Buddhist. You can be, a guy who wants to change the world economically. And we can see each other on our different planes and realize that the common line between us all is love for each other. Oneness. You, me, we look different. We sound different. We're doing different things, but we're all doing it for the good. That one thing of helping other people, whether it be the planet, whether it be people, whether it be animals, no matter what it is, we're all trying to find the good in humanity, and we're tired of the evil in humanity. So we just want to be able to say, okay, how can we do this as one? And that's called community. And we don't have to be the exact same. That's the misnomer. People think we have to be the exact same. No, the only thing that's same is love, honor, respect, and that's the unity within the community.
Wow, thank you. Thanks for bringing it.
He brought it home, didn't he? Jeez.
He did. Well, I want to thank each of you for being on here. Mark Eckhart of Common, Drew Weaver of Black Dollar Fund, and Paul Giotto with his Zen consultancy. I'm Marla Regal of the Inspired Business Center, and blessing and gratitude to this panel. I hope that it has given somebody engaging with us some insight, some inspiration, some awareness, joy, learning, just any way that you have benefited from being a part of this. And I hope that I know I speak for each one of us on the panel that our contact info will be on our bios, and you can reach out to us and engage. So thanks to each of you. and follow your own passion, your own talent out there in the world in that oneness. And we want to thank Humanities team for inviting us to have this conversation with you today. So thanks and blessed be.
Thank you, Marla.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Marla.
Marla. Appreciate it.
Yep.
Congratulations on signing up for the Global Oneness Summit, and welcome to our Conscious Global Tribe. I want to encourage you to do two things right now. The first is to watch this short video to the end when I will share a special offer with you. And the second is to mark your calendar for Saturday, October 16th through Sunday, October 24th, the actual Global Oneness Day, so you don't miss out on any of the 9 days of exciting panels and other programs we'll be sharing with you. This year's theme of opening to your universal self is about following your soul's calling. It's about finding and fully engaging your purpose in life. It's about coming into self-mastery. It's about finding inner peace. It's about becoming the beautiful, whole, pure expression of your divine higher self you've always known yourself to be. When you open to your universal self, you become more aware, more alive, and more in harmony with life. You live intentionally and metaphysically, fully expressing who you are, so you may live the life of your dreams. The Global Oneness Summit is a foundational part of our larger mission to make conscious living pervasive worldwide in the next 20 years. And our primary vehicle for making that happen is the Humanities Stream Plus streaming platform we created to assist you in fulfilling this mission for yourself, in your own home, in your workplace, in your community, and in the wider world. Many of you who are watching this are already Humanities Stream Plus members, but if you've not yet joined us in this capacity, this is your chance to become a member. Humanities Stream Plus is a groundbreaking platform and community that is quite literally transforming transformational education. We've created some of the most powerful and innovative masterclasses available in the marketplace today, and for anyone on the conscious journey, Humanities Stream Plus may well be the best investment you can make in yourself. You'll gain unlimited access to our most popular masterclasses, along with hundreds of other transformational education programs, with new programs being added every week. You'll also have access to brand new masterclasses as they are released, live mentoring programs with faculty, free upgrades, VIP programs, virtual forums, and so much more. To date, we've partnered with many of the most extraordinary conscious leaders in the world. Too many to name here. But when you click the link below this video, you'll be taken to the full menu of Humanities Stream Plus programs, where you'll get a quick sense of just how many incredible luminaries we've partnered with. Two other unique and innovative elements of Humanities Stream Plus are our focus on collaborative teaching, creating programs with more than one teacher that are even more powerful than solo taught programs, and our commitment to offer multiple mentoring sessions with our faculty, so they can offer you personal guidance along your individual path. What makes this truly special is there's no need for you to stay anchored in front of your computer. You can watch our content from the comfort of your bedroom, living room, kitchen, front porch, or while you travel anywhere in the world, because Humanities Stream Plus is available on iOS, Android, Android TV, Fire TV, Roku, and Apple TV. And it's super easy to use, just like your favorite streaming movie or music platform. And you'll be blown away by how much more intuitive the revolutionary new graphical interface we're using for Humanities Stream Plus is than anything else you've ever seen. It goes even further than Netflix and Amazon Prime. So if you haven't found your conscious global tribe, this is it. Half our members are in the United States and half are located in other geographies. And all of them are serious about living consciously. In our Humanities Stream community, we are open-hearted. We live in flow. and we hold space for each other to grow and evolve in our own unique ways. We gather together weekly and often several times a week, and when we're not gathered face to face, we're connecting with each other in our virtual community where we make new and diverse contacts with others. This year's entire 9-day Global Oneness Summit with over 30 panels and over 70 speakers will be recorded for your viewing pleasure. And while this is normally a $247 upgrade option, with Humanity Stream Plus, you receive access to it all for free, along with access to our previous summits for an almost endless stream of uplifting inspiration. If you were to purchase the masterclasses and transformational education programs separately, it would cost more than $12,000. But for just $497 a year, you can subscribe to Humanity Stream Plus and receive access to it all. This breaks down to only a little more than $1 a day. Imagine who you'll be able to become when you join our supportive Humanity Stream Plus community and begin engaging in this exciting journey with others around the world to your fully conscious self. Truly, this small investment will yield life-transforming results for you and all those whose lives you touch, helping to shape the conscious evolution of our world. You can join Humanity Stream Plus with our 7-day free trial and an additional 7-day money-back guarantee. And if you decide you'd like to continue with us after that, you'll get it all for just a little more than the cost of a single masterclass. So if you're on a conscious journey and you want to live the life of your dreams and influence and inspire others to be better and to do better, together with a supportive global tribe, Humanity Stream Plus is for you. Just click the link below to start your 7-day free Humanity Stream Plus trial right away. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you soon at our upcoming Opening to Your Universal Self Global Oneness Summit that starts on Saturday, October 16th.